Okay, are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay, good morning, everyone. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's,
Please mute your microphone if you're not speaking.
in compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law, under COVID-19 emergency declaration, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Action during the meeting will be taken by voice. To select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon again and mute your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. All meeting activity is being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube and TV20 for public view. We have provided a link to the meeting for those who wish to speak on a particular case via our website and email. We have also received emails from those who have provided written comment on a particular matter. Madam Chair, the meeting is yours.
Madam Chair, I believe you're muted or something.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Mr. Secretary, please call roll.
Good morning. Ms. Anderson?
Carl, you're muted.
Carl?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Anderson? Ms. Bailey?
You're muted, Adrian. Still muted. Now you're not.
Mr. Colicchio? Mr. Collier?
Present.
Mr. Dreyer?
Here.
Mr. Harrison?
Here.
Mr. Jones? Mr. Strickland?
Here.
Mr. Tarasic?
Here.
Ms. Trott?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
All right. Thank you. We will call the June 25th Landmarks Commission meeting to order. We will start with our certificates of appropriateness. We'd like to ask the first presenter to use the raise hand function to have your microphone unmuted and so that we can easily identify you. The host will then control the slide. So please, Ian, let us know when you would like your slide to be advanced. The first applicant is located at Tremont Oaks, West 14th Street, the new construction of an apartment building.
Madam Chair, we have Rick Marin.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Okay, good. Had a local landmarks meeting last week, and we reviewed basically your comments, which basically were two from the last one, which were to create a setback along West 14th, and also to make a cornice that was continuous and not broken up. We've incorporated both of those things, and the local landmarks, they probably gave you comments, but they were very favorable. And one of the fringe benefits of doing the setback allowed us to move the entrance to the center of the building, which makes it much more attractive. So we think these suggestions were wise, and we incorporated all of them. And the concern that we had at the last meeting was that we wouldn't be able to manage the parking, but we actually did, and we came up with the appropriate amount of parking spaces. And there's two options in this presentation. Either one is fine. I presented them to zoning, and zoning approved either one of them. So either one can be done. I guess I'll leave it for you unless you want me to explain more.
Did you want me to go through the slides, Mr. Mayor?
It's up to you. I know we went through them last time. I can go through them again if you wish.
I think we'd like just to highlight, if you could, since we did see this presentation last meeting, just highlight the changes for the overall group, and we can focus on just the things that have changed since the last time we saw this.
Okay, on that screen that you have right now, there is now a setback, which there was not before. It's about 7.5 feet. And the last time we had 6 parking spaces, and on this slide, in the next slide, you will see that there are 2 options. That is the one you have now is the 6 parking spaces. The local landmarks had trouble with the idea that the car to the north would be abused. So they seem to like the first parking situation better, where it's strictly pulled in. So that's the one change on the setback and the parking. And if you scroll down a few slides, I can show you the elevations and how it looks. There's the landscaping plan along with West 14th. There's, and I don't know if you can blow that up or not, but the east elevation now has the entrance in the center, which makes it much more symmetrical. And you'll also notice that the cornice is continuous all the way around the building. And I think that was a good suggestion. Basically, as you suggested before, with the brick on the base. And I think between those two, it really makes the building look nice. Those were the main changes. Basically, the cornice and the setback. And we accommodated the parking accordingly.
Are you also now proposing the signage to be part of your proposal?
Well, that was a question. They debated a little bit about the signage, but then said that this signage was fine. I don't know if you care about what we put on the signage. So should we call it Tremont Oaks, or for example, Tremont Micros, we could call it. I don't know if you have input or weigh in on that, the actual wording on the sign. It's above the entrance in the West 14th. Probably if you go up a slide, you could see it better.
There
Yeah,
you go.
there's only one sign. It's right above on the top of the building there. So if you have any opinions on that, we can take that into account as well.
Okay, excellent. Does that summarize all the changes from the last presentation?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have feedback from the local design review committee? Is anyone present from the Tremont West?
Madam Chair, we have Michelle.
Good morning, Landmarks Committee. Rick presented his changes on last week, and the local committee approved as presented. They did suggest, as Rick had presented, reducing 5 parking spaces down to 6. I mean, 6 parking spaces down to 5. Just for easier egress of having to back out from 14th Street. They did have comments about Rick's sign. They weren't sure for an 8-unit apartment if it needed to be so large as they can. So, but they didn't have a solution. They were hoping you all would maybe make a comment. That's it. They like their improvements.
Excellent. Thank you. Do we have any additional feedback from city departmental staff?
There's a lot of feedback
No?
on their end.
Madam Chair, I have no one else with their hands raised at the moment.
Okay, excellent. Then let's move on to feedback from the from the Landmarks Commission.
We have Mr. Harrison with his hand raised.
Go ahead, Mr. Harrison.
Just want to thank the developer for taking these suggestions into consideration. I think the building is a much better design, a very strong entrance, a symmetrical plan that really reflects the character of other apartment buildings of that size in Tremont. And I personally think Tremont Oaks is a nice name, and while I think the lettering is a little bit too big, I would not, I'm not hung up on that. I can support this in its current design. Thank you.
Thank you. Other commission feedback from commission members?
Yes, Director Collier here. I would like to say that I actually drove by this site yesterday, as a matter of fact, because we had some dialogue in the last meeting with the local development corporation and others about context, etc. As I drove by this site and I looked around, it's more contextual than what you would imagine with respect to this stretch of road and the building facade. When you think about the size of this building, which is relatively, small, the accents and features that they are putting on this building is accessorizing this building pretty greatly, and with respect to the site layout and the addition of the shrubs and things, it gives it a very soft residential feel. I'm more comfortable. I was comfortable at our last meeting, but I'm more confident, I would say, that this is going to be a pretty good addition to that corner, as you come out and enter into 14th Street, on this corridor. So I'm in full support of this at this point, and I just want to provide that recommendation. And we'll be willing to entertain a motion if we're there yet.
Other feedback from other commission members?
Madam Chair, we have no other hands raised at this point.
Okay. Well, I think the only comment I would make, I would echo what Mr. Harrison said. I think, want to thank you for taking our feedback. I think it's a great improvement. I do, if related to feedback on the sign, the name of the development, I think Tremont Oaks has a much more timeless, is more timeless than Tremont Micro. I think it's sort of dating yourself by putting Micro up there. So that would be my personal opinion on that. I do think the size is a little large for the sign itself related to your detailing. So I would just recommend continuing to study that sign area. But it's nothing that I feel that needs to be held up. I would just study that, the size of the sign and or the cornice on that sign, and then if you make changes, submit it to staff.
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Harrison with his hand raised.
Go ahead, Mr. Harrison.
But you're muted, sir.
So sorry. I would like to move that we approve this proposal as presented.
Madam Chair, we have Michelle with another comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Giancarlo. I would like to see a rendering how corresponds with the church and the house next door. Do we have such a thing?
It's just,
Do you have a site plan that you could go back to that has more larger context?
I think that's the only, the two variations on the parking are the only site plans. Is that correct, Mr. Marin? You're muted.
I just have a point of order. We have a motion on the table, and we're either going to have that withdrawn, or we're going to have a second on that before we can move forward.
Thank you for keeping us aligned. So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second before we move on, or do we need
Madam,
to?
Madam Chair, Mr. Harrison has his hand raised again. Somebody is giving us a lot of feedback. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone.
Am I recognized?
Yes.
I will withdraw my motion.
So the motion has been removed from the table. We're back to discussion.
Madam Chair, we have Adrian Bailey with her hand raised. We still can't hear you, Adrian. Can you type in the chat your comments to everyone? Madam Chair, Carl has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Carl.
Just to answer Mr. Colicchio's question, there are vacant lots on either side of this project.
Adrian was going to second the motion.
Okay. Well, the motion's been withdrawn, so we don't have a motion on the table yet. So is there, Mr. Colicchio, did that answer your question?
that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Marin, you have your hand raised. Was that just from earlier, or are you okay? And you're muted. Mr. Harrison has his hand raised.
That was from earlier.
Thank you.
Did my colleague Michelle Anderson have a comment?
Not really. I came to this meeting late because of technical difficulties. So I really don't feel like I am in a
Okay.
Well, in that case, I will renew my motion to approve this project as presented with the new, in this iteration of the project.
With the parking shown in, are these two parking layouts labeled differently? I cannot see on my screen if there's a notation of option 1 or option 2.
It looks like that on the bottom right, one is SP4 and one is, whoops, SP5. So that's, by the way, for everyone's information, there should be a vertical toolbar on to the left of the presentation, and there is a plus and minus that you can actually zoom in and scroll around on anything that's on screen, just so that you all know.
Excellent. Thank you. I did not know that.
SP4, I think, is the one that you want.
Madam Chair, I would like to have my motion be one that is flexible for the developer to determine whether they want the first parking iteration or the second, depending on the actual building out of the project.
Thank you.
So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
This is Bob Strickland. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. We have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion? If not, Mr. Secretary, can you please call roll and announce the results?
Ms. Anderson,
I'm going to abstain from voting because I missed most of the.
Ms. Bailey,
You can just type it in the window, Adrian, if you'd like. We can't hear you.
give a thumbs up
Just give a thumbs up.
Or down.
or down. Yes. Okay.
Okay, she thumbs up.
Mr. Galicchia, Mr. Collier, Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
Ms. Trot.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you. We look forward to your project.
I'd like to thank everyone. It was very helpful, and I think you made it a better project. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that feedback also. That's truly helpful. We'll move on to our second applicant located at Lincoln Park Flats, West 14th Street in Kenilworth, the demolition of a connector between the rectory and church. I'm assuming this goes hand in hand with the third case, which is the new construction of the apartment building. Is that correct? We'd ask the applicant to raise their hand so you can be unmuted.
I believe we have David. There he is, David Mason.
Good morning.
Good morning. Why don't you tell us both about both cases that you have on the agenda, the demolition and then the new construction, and then we will act on each case separately after you present.
Great. The first case is for the demolition of the connector that currently exists between the church and the residence that was used as a rectory. We went through the exercise to kind of clean up the lots. They were, oh, sure. This is an overview of the park. And here we're looking at, the site. Looking to the south, you can see the church to the right of the green square. The green square is the lot area that will be part of the second case or described in the second case. And then just to the south of the green square is the existing rectory building. There's a connector then that connects those two buildings in the corner. As they currently sit there, non-conforming lots, the parcels overlap each other. The church is on some of the house is on some of the church, and the connectors on both. So we went to city planning, have asked for the lot split. The documentation has been submitted to the county and the city both for the new lot splits or lot consolidation and split, so that we would end up with conforming lots. City planning then sent us to Landmarks for the approval of the removal of the connector. Next slide, please. So this map shows the darker lines are the new lot lines, which would then again they'd be conforming lot lines. Each building would be on its own parcel. The lighter dashed lines you can see below are the previous lot lines, which again are non-conforming. So the next step for us then is to remove the connector, which kind of overlaps all three parcels. Next slide, please. Just an overview of the site again, and some photographs of the connector that was a later addition. I think there's not much that's contributing about this piece. So again, we're proposing the removal of it. Maybe the next slide. I think this might be, yes. So we've done a little investigation work, and the nice thing is when we remove this connector, you can see inside the building, inside the church building, the stained glass windows weren't harmed when the connector was built. To the right, you can see a photograph showing there's a cavity wall. So the existing masonry in the church remains. It was built out and then flashed over at the mullion line, or at the mullion line in the windows. So we'll be able to when we're finished removing the connector, the windows will be, the way they were, and the masonry is intact as well. We're proposing that the stair that goes to the basement and the connector is going to be infilled, and any masonry work would be added to match. But the grade is such that we shouldn't have any visible exterior masonry affected. It all appears to be there. For the home, there's going to be, it is an ongoing project. So when we remove the connector from the home, we're just going to seal it up with an exterior grade plywood and some protective membrane to keep the weather out, because it eventually will be a project that comes before you folks. Next slide. And again, this is a demolition plan that shows in the darker hash the extent of the connector as it exists today. Next. And the site plan for reference, we included that. This will also show up in the second case, but this is what's being proposed in the apartment building project that we're going to discuss next. Next slide. Context photo. Again, we can talk about this more, I think, in the next phase of the project. Next, please. Okay, so now we've got just a series of 8.5 by 11s that have been submitted that describe the lot split and consolidation. I'm not sure we want to discuss those, so we might want to just move through that part of the package. Next, please. Next, please. So again, here we are. Okay, yeah. So here we are with again, assuming the connector is approved and removed, we're now on to the representing the apartment building project. We presented this to you conceptually a couple of weeks ago. There was some feedback. Should we jump right to the feedback, or should we go through as if we haven't talked about this before? What do you prefer?
Sorry, I put myself on mute. Why don't you highlight, I think the majority of the people were in attendance the last time that this was presented. So why don't you highlight the changes that you've done based on the feedback you received?
Great. So then the biggest adjustment that we've made was trying to find a place for the height of the brick. So maybe if we could move on to the elevate the rent. There we go. So this is how it was presented. We kind of, in an effort to maybe try to make the building feel a little bit. This was a feel decision, at least on my part, and I kind of liked the cap as it was and the masonry as it was, but there was the suggestion to raise the masonry. So we wanted to show you what that would look like, because again, that was a request that came from the board. So if we could go one more, will be the original proposal, and then the next slide, then we'll start. So we did this a couple of different ways. We raised the masonry just on the corner piece, and that's what this slide shows, and then left the flanking sides as we move towards the church, and then in the next slide you'll see the entry. Both kind of stayed where they were, and we lifted the corner. Thought that might be kind of interesting. And again, it's food for conversation. And then if we could go to one more slide, then this shows all of the masonry again lifted up to the elevation of the balcony. And then following slide will show same thing. Another point that was brought up was that there was want for us to be cognizant of the underside of the balconies, because they are visible, and it's not as easy on these on the Zoom call, but what we're proposing is it's a pre-manufactured unit, so they're very clean and they're pre-finished. So underside and surface of the balcony, with including structure, is all a pre-finished aluminum, and it's very clean. It's not an unfinished look on the bottom of the balcony. And I'm not sure if this. I've got a sample of what the material is that would be the balcony deck. The framing itself would be aluminum channel that is also pre-finished. Those were the comments that stood out in my mind that I felt needed to be addressed. If we want to, do we want to get into questions, or is there more you'd like me to talk about with the project? I can't hear.
We have Ms. Bailey with her hand raised.
Actually, before we go there, I'm sorry, I muted myself. I have 2 dogs often in the background, so I'll go on mute. If that concludes the changes from the last presentations, I think that is, we can move questions. Let's move on to any additional feedback from the local design review based on these revisions.
Well, we still have Adrienne with her hand raised.
Ms. Bailey, I'm going to ask you to hold your comments until we get to the commission, till I open the floor to the commission members.
And it looks like Khalid has typed in the chat window asking about a parking plan. And we also have Michelle with her hand raised.
Okay, Khalid, can you speak on behalf of the local design review of these revisions? So
Mr. Reardon actually has, Mr. Reardon has his hand raised. I guess he wants to make comments. You're muted. Okay, there you go.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Michelle has more information about the local design review process and some confusion that happened there. But I did want to make sure that you received the letter that I sent, that Michelle sent out yesterday. Did everyone have a chance to read that?
I did personally, yes.
Because
Mr. Henderson says yes.
My issues with this project is not design related. It has to do with the parking and the slippery slope that we're embarking on by creating policy without going through what I perceive to be the proper channels, which would be the Planning Commission and the City Council. This is a significant variance request from 49 required parking spots of 30 some to 0, and I have serious concerns about that. Additionally, I would ask Director Collier what the significant changes in the environment in Tremont are that a zoning change that happened just 3 years ago is no longer relevant for that site, that reduced parking but did not eliminate parking. So those are my major concerns at the moment, and I think that once Landmarks weighs in without an appropriate parking plan, without appropriate parking based on the zoning requirements, that I'm concerned that it'll be utilized for Landmarks to say that Landmarks supported it without parking.
Madam Chair, we still have Michelle Davis. Were you?
Hi, good morning, everyone. We reviewed this project in 2 separate meetings. The first meeting we reviewed the demolition, and the committee supported the demolition as presented. They wanted to make sure that we didn't get a full picture slides as you did, but they assured us that when they removed the walkway, that they would restore the church windowsills and paint it appropriately to match the existing structure on the church. And additionally, they told us that they weren't going to finish the rectory building and leave that for whoever was going to be doing the rehabilitation of that structure. So they were just going to do a soft closure of that structure. And our committee voted with 1 no and 5 yeses on that. Earlier this week on Monday, they returned and we discussed this project, and it was a long meeting, and it came out that they did vote in support of the project and asked that they really consider what they're going to do about parking. We were told by the developers and by the city planning staff that they don't need a variance for parking, that they can build this with 0 parking spaces. And I did find since that Monday meeting that is not true. So I'm not sure what to do with the local committee's motion, being that they weren't given all the facts. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Madam Chair, I have, Corey, do you still have your hand raised? Now we have Michelle from the Landmarks Commission.
Okay, do we have feedback from the local department, city planning, regarding what the requirement is for parking for this site, to clarify that? Mr. Moss with us today? I don't know.
Madam Chair, I am here if you'd like me to speak to this.
If you could just clarify for the commission what the parking requirement is, just so we understand, would be very helpful.
Sure, the developer is required to have off-street parking under the code. The urban form overlay does reduce the minimum parking requirement. And the developer is also able to meet, per the city zoning code, any off-street parking requirements on property that they own within 400 feet of this property. I think the developer indicated at a previous meeting that they own parking within, owned other property within that distance of this parcel. That's information that would have to be presented to the city's Board of Zoning Appeals in order to obtain a parking variance and therefore become compliant with the zoning code through the variance process, or otherwise demonstrate that they have sufficient parking to the Building and Housing Department.
Thank you.
This is Director Collier. Question, what is the variance request at this point, the specifics?
Mr. Mason, can you speak if you've gone in front of the Board of asked for your variances?
We have not applied to BZA yet. We were waiting until this meeting transpired, but our specific variance request will be for 32 spaces, as I understand it. It's the 65% of the number of units in the building as per the urban form overlay. So it would be a 32 space variance request.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer your question, Mr. Collier?
It does, because that leads me to my next comment. When we talk about the urban form overlay and its intent and the type of areas that the urban overlay is applied to, which are typically corridor, major thoroughfares, in areas where there exists high density, or we're seeking to increase the density and walkability of an area. This area is obviously unique because you do have a park setting here, and the development of the neighborhood obviously flanks that park. The building scale, and we've had discussions about this previously, the building scale that exists around here, this building is similar in height and also similar in massing than like some of the traditional apartment buildings. Like there are a row of apartment buildings kind of cornered to this site. The park setting lends itself to this type of scale. With respect to the off-street parking in the area, and I'm really want to hear from the Development Corporation with respect to this. I know that there is opportunity for off-street parking around the park, as well as on Kenilworth, because the street is parked all the time, at least a portion directly north of the actual park. So this conversation is one where you have this transition as you approach this intersection from that sort of pure residential fabric to getting into some more of the more higher density apartment units as you move northward. And I think that the building, how it's sited and its design is appropriate. You know, this conversation about what's enough parking versus what is not. I think we also have to take into consideration that the world is transitioning. Cleveland may be slower with respect to this, but the world is transitioning with respect to automobile use. And part of what we're trying to figure out is what is that right now with respect to the neighborhoods, how as neighborhoods matured with respect to alternative modes of transportation. So that's a very real conversation. And I don't know if we can just stick to the traditional parking requirements that we've had in the past. And this is part of the reason why you see code changes and things that lend itself to parking reductions and things of that nature. So I think it's very important to consider, and I think it is appropriate that that conversation be had at the Board of Zoning Appeals. I hear Mr. Radorian's, Corey's comments with respect to, well, if a landmarks approval is given, then that's an automatic endorsement, if I'm hearing Mr. Radorian correctly, at the Board of Zoning Appeals. That's a separate board, and they have to make a determination on the project based on whatever its merits are. So I won't say that that's automatic. I will say that with respect to the site and the way this designed, there are clear indications that the department has support for this actual project and the layout here, given the urban overlay and other tools that we've articulated. So I'm going to give you that to think about with respect to your anticipation of how the division views this particular project at this point.
Madam Chair, we have several hands raised. We have Michelle Anderson. We have Matthew Moss. We have Khalid from Tremont West. We have Adrian Bailey.
Okay, why don't we start with Michelle? Why don't you've been patient? Let's.
This is regarding the connector. Landmarks Commission conducted a site visit to the church. This was, and we found the conditions of the church pretty bad. There is a major roof leak at the location of that back onion dome. And I am concerned that there's going to be continued deterioration there. I want to know what has been done to mitigate those conditions.
Sam, you can corroborate, but I believe that they have managed one of the ornamental spires came off at the back portion of the church, and that's where the water was getting in. But I believe that they've buttoned that up. That's my understanding. Now there is still some leaking. I was there in the past couple of weeks. There's still some leaking that's occurring in the roof of the connector, and a little bit of water still getting into the basement there. But I think the main body of the church has been has been secured. And again, if Sam's on, he might be able to.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on. So from how we understand it, the diocese did in fact replace most of the roof in the past 5 years. There are some flashings and ongoing maintenance. We haven't tackled that just quite yet. Most of this project is tied together, so there will be 3 pieces to it. Obviously, the home, the church, as well as the parking lot. So master plan is to secure it and get it into active status as soon as possible. So in general, we do not have concern that the church is continuing to have damage.
Well, this was back in, I want to say maybe October, that months ago. We get a lot of rain in this area, and the continued deterioration is going to be very detrimental to that church.
So the interior, I guess the interior damage that you had recognized was pre-roof replacement. There's been no further damage since the roof has been repaired. That's existing damage.
So all of that occurred before the roof repair?
All of that occurred before the roof repair, correct, and prior to our acquisition.
So you're saying that now that everything has been patched and there's no continued water infiltration?
Other than the connector, correct.
Ms. Anderson, you're muted. I don't know if you realize that. Were you still?
I'm good. Thank you.
Michelle, did you have another comment? You're muted. I'm not sure, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, you're muted too.
Why don't, well, Ms. Anderson figures out to unmute if she has an additional question. Why don't we move on to the next person?
So we had, I believe Matthew Moss had his hand raised.
Go ahead, Mr. Moss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to provide a little more context in addition to what Director Collier already provided in terms of how planning staff review these projects. In addition to, we are asked to review these projects, and they go through a discrete process through landmarks and through Board of Zoning Appeals for specific asks for their specific properties. We're also taking into consideration other development that's happening in the neighborhood. There are several projects that are in various stages of development that are similar to this project. There are multifamily housing projects that are being built in the Tremont neighborhood. There have been several over the last few years that have started development and have completed construction or are now open. There's the Tappan project over on Scranton Road, which is about 69 units and 101 off-street parking spaces. Electric Gardens is currently under construction at the northeast end of the neighborhood, and that's 130 units with 145 off-street parking spaces. And a third project that's has not started construction yet, but is under development is the Lincoln project, which is just down the street from here on Scranton. And that's about 120 units right now proposed with 129 off-street parking spaces. The reason I want to give this context is because it's a vital component of our citywide master plan to provide a variety of housing options for a variety of lifestyles and housing that supports a variety of transportation modes. And so what we're really seeing in reality, not just in Tremont, but on the near west side and in the city as a whole, is that projects like this are a real minority of development projects that we see. And a reason why I'm supportive of this proposal as presented is because I feel it's meeting those goals of providing a variety of housing options and for a variety of lifestyles. There's one transit line left in the neighborhood. It's the 81. It runs every 40 minutes. In order to support transit, support walkability, we need housing, especially on surface parking lots, especially in walkable areas across from amenities such as a city park. Those are essential investments, I think, in terms of meeting those goals stated in our 2020 master plan. And because of that other context, this is really filling a gap that's missing in terms of what types of housing products are being provided. Again, this still has to go through a process in order to obtain a parking variance or otherwise demonstrate that they can meet the code if they choose not to request a variance. But I wanted to provide that context because I think that's something that really needs to be highlighted for the commission's sake in terms of your decision today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have still have Adrian Bailey, and then we have 3 folks from Tremont West. We have Corey, Khalid, and Michelle all wishing to comment.
Ms. Bailey?
We still can't hear
cannot hear you.
Adrian, sorry. Have you tried just calling in separately? She typed something in the chat. At previous project discussion, asked developer if reviewed interior parking of building.
We have.
Miss-
We started with that concept with the first 2 floors at grade and 1+. We did run that down. Not only does it economically not work, but it just doesn't contribute. All the feedback we've had on the facade look and constructability of this project has obviously would be probably a big eyesore with 2 floors of parking on that corner exposed to the park.
It's when we retained the existing residents, the site got considerably smaller, and so there's a tough little balance for us between we need to provide living space on the ground level per the requirements of the urban form overlay. We ran out of site. We would have had, instead of units on the ground level at the street level, we'd end up with parking spaces at the street level, and and I didn't speak to it too much because we've talked about this before, but this development team is singularly minded in this is a project for tenants who are not dependent on a motor vehicle. We've got bicycle storage on every floor. The development team has talked about this before as well, that there's a cost associated with these parking spaces. And I think this ties in with what Matt was saying about having a different kind of product for the community. The parking spaces aren't free. They cost a considerable amount of money to the development team. The removal of that expense allows for not only something that serves a population that doesn't own a vehicle, they Uber or they use public transportation or they ride their bicycles or whatever combination, but it saves them a little money as well. The cost of that parking gets figured into the rental rate of a unit. This is a commitment from this team to provide a product that meets a unique and what is unique now, but we think won't be that unique in the future, is people who don't need a car to get around and do their jobs and live their lives. There are other ways now available. So again, because of the ideas, the ideals of the development team, and then also in meeting the urban form overlay, which we felt was more important in showing having a walkable street front as opposed to a parking level. We didn't go the direction with trying to fit 3 or 4 spaces on the ground floor.
Madam Chair, Adrian also typed in the chat that she wanted to know if they were looking at interior below grade parking.
This is Sam. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work code wise. The clearances you need, the footprint that we currently have, it would actually end up being 5 stories below grade. Impossible to accommodate.
Okay, Madam Chair, we still have our 3 people from Tremont West, Corey, Khalid, and Michelle.
If we could consolidate or open it to limiting that so we can move on to commission feedback too. I'll open up the floor to them, but then I'd like to move to more commission feedback also. So go ahead, Corey.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll just take a minute. I think there's a right way and a wrong way to approach this. I do think it amounts to a significant policy change. The right way to eliminate parking as a requirement in a neighborhood is legislation. Right now, this feels like a different attempt at getting something done without the community feedback. And I think it is a slippery slope that we need to be cautious of. Additionally, I hear about I hear all sorts of things about parking and bikes and all of that, but the developer is getting two bonuses on this project. One is by not providing parking, and that allows him to increase density there, and along with a 15-year tax abatement. He's saying that it's not affordable to do any other way. I think it was a 28-unit building at one time with parking, so I don't buy that. And what is the community benefit? What is the community getting in return as part of this project? We all want to be progressive on these topics, but be progressive to understand the impacts of these types of developments and mitigate the impacts on the community before we go through approval processes. Claims as a transit corridor, Matt Moss was right. It's a bus that comes every 30 to 40 minutes. And if we're going to make these claims about bus and people using the bus, we have to understand what choices people make and when they make those choices. And it's proven, I don't have the number in front of me, I hope the planning department could help me out with that there is a frequency rate that attracts people to transit, and it's certainly not 30 to 40 minutes. Additionally, bikes. I'm all for bikes. I ride my bike. I try to ride my bike to work once a week. But we still just can't throw out random stats or random ideas as to what we want to see happen. We have to understand what is happening. And right now, the latest stat that I have, and even if it's increased a little bit, is that 0.6% of the region bikes to work. 0.6%. So where we see these developments is in places like Portland, where all those parking requirements are waived, where 10% or more people bike to work. And those developments came after the fact. So I hope that I want to have these conversations. I'm all for it. If we can get comfortable with the impacts and the trade-offs of the community, let's change the policy. But let's not start at landmarks with the conversation. Let's start at the community, and through community dialogue and the Planning Commission and legislation. I think that's the proper way to move a project like this forward. It seems like they've cut out the community conversation. They are making claims on what's good for the community, and we haven't had the robust conversation. It should be a process. It should be rooted in how what the community sees, and the planning department should be working with the community to realize these visions. All right, that's what I have. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we also have Bob Strickland with his hand raised. We still have, and Fred Collier. Khalid still has his hand raised. And Brent Zimmerman from the development team. I'm not sure if he had a comment.
So why don't we move on to Khalid? Do you have anything beyond what Mr. Warden just spoke about?
Yeah, so it's Ruben, by the way, everybody. So yes, this is Khalid Hawthorne, Housing and Economic Development Director for Tremont West. Just wanted to add some numbers to what Corey stated. When you talk about that subsidy, that is up to a $600,000 subsidy we're talking about as far as reduction of structured parking spaces. So depending on that's $10,000 to $20,000 a space, $20,000 a space. It can be up to a $600,000 subsidy we're talking about regarding the project. Also, they talk about affordable housing. What are those numbers? We need them to show us the numbers. They have every community group that they've gone to has asked them for a parking plan, and that does not include a map with some P's on it. That is actual letter of intent or something to show that they have committed space, potential committed spaces. So we would like to, everybody has asked for that. They have not shown it. They haven't done their homework as far as that's concerned. Also, I drove by the building across the street, Tremont Loss, this morning. Even at close to 9 o'clock this morning, 16 cars in spaces that Tremont Loft, which was built as a zero parking building, but they lease space from Grace Hospital and the Ukrainian Center. There are 16 cars currently in that space, 9 cars in the Ukrainian space. So there's obviously, and that's all we ask for. Well, that's the main thing is show us your spaces and committed spaces. The code asks for 400 feet. If you own within 400 feet, they do not own spaces currently in 400 feet, so they would need that variance. And I also clarify that they mentioned many times that I told them that there were committed spaces. That was not true or accurate. What I did was connect them to people who are currently renting out spaces in the area, and I haven't seen that they have made those connections or heard heard. That's all the comments that I have this time.
Thank you. Mr. Strickland, why don't we move on to your comments and open some space for the commission for questions and comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, first and foremost, I just wanted to express right up front my tremendous support for this project. I think that adding density along the major transportation corridors is a very positive move for any neighborhood, and particularly Tremont. I thought that Matt Moss's explanation was extremely helpful, and talks about the progressive nature of adding alternative forms of housing so that more of the population can be served with available housing, and providing those options, I think, is advantageous. I also wanted to add a comment that personally, I thought that the original design of the masonry, picking up that line of windows below the balconies, I happen to prefer that look as opposed to extending the masonry up to the height of the balconies. And that's the extent of my comments. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we also have Director Collier, Michelle Anderson, and Mr. Harrison with their hands raised.
Yeah, so I just want to acknowledge some of the commentary made by Mr. Hawthorne and Mr. Dorian with respect to the planning department in connecting with the community. Everything that we're doing and have done has been a part of robust community engagement citywide and at the CDC level. None of what we talk about, discuss, promote, or advocate for is foreign with respect to community engagement and dialogue. What we're talking about right now is this particular project and how it plays out. Now, there's some fair statements that were made by Mr. Hawthorne in particular with respect to the developer interest being able to demonstrate those commitments. And that's part of what the BZA process will need to do going through that variance process. This board, however, has a different responsibility to a degree than the Board of Zoning Appeals. And I just want to emphasize the fact that with respect to looking at stats, our current stats, part of what we have to do as a planning commission or planning department is also set the conditions for people to behave with respect to the physical environment. So we have to do a lot of condition setting, not just looking at what has been, looking at what we need to go, where we need to go. And there's a exchange that has to happen in that. And this board, as well as the Board of Zoning Appeals and others, these are forms in which that exchange could happen. So I just want to be clear that we don't do anything unilaterally. We are leading with respect to changing zoning policy putting forth these zoning amendments and things based on not just local trends, but national trends. So we don't do this in a vacuum. And I don't think that that was fair to make that statement, given the fact that we've connected and worked with you guys on many initiatives. And these things don't come up when we're in agreement. So when there is a lack of agreement on certain items, this is the place, these boards and commissions, the forums that we have are the ways in which we work through that. And if we get to a place where we may need to agree to disagree, then that's what it is. So I do want to just say that the commentary that was made, particularly by Mr. Hawthorne and Mr. Redorian, there were some fair statements in there that provoked some curiosity in me as well with respect to just a demonstration of, yes, if there's parking reductions, that's fine. But the question is, what commitments do you have? That's legitimate. And I think that's going to come up as we continue to discuss this with respect to their zoning variances, et cetera. But I just would prefer that statements regarding a lack of engagement by this department is just not accurate. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Corey Reardon has typed in the chat that, and he asks what has changed since the zoning changed in 2017.
And I would just have to ask if he could be more specific.
Sure, the zoning was changed to what I would consider to be taken into account the current conditions and the future conditions in the neighborhood to encourage the best development. And that was a reduction of parking by a third, not the elimination of parking. So what has changed to say that the parking should be eliminated as part of this project?
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Harrison and Ms. Anderson with their hands raised. And Chairman, Ms. Trott is having some connection issues right now, so maybe we can just wait a second. Nope, still can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Okay, let's see. I will go back off. Go ahead, Mr. Harrison.
Yes, I first of all want to really express my appreciation to Collier and to Matt Moss for their helpful explanations of their process and also the jurisdictions, if you will, of these various committees, the commissions. I see our role here as one of ethics with regard to new building in an historic district. And so I'd like to address my comments to go way back in this conversation to the discussion of the raising of the brick facade. I think the new plan is much more sympathetic to the height of the building and in better scale with the elements of that facade. And I would never advocate splitting up, because you see the facade along Kenilworth, that is still a facade, and I wouldn't, while I understand a hierarchy of elements and facade elements is a tradition in architecture, I really would take the two sides, Kenilworth and West 14th, as one. You can certainly leave off any changes to that southern facade because it is faced by a building. But I think that the new height is absolutely perfect and still retains that sort of very large cornice cap without being overscaled. I just feel like the first one was you just didn't quite have it, in my view. And when you got to the second one, where it comes just under the line of the balconies, I think it was a much better artistic rendering. And I would take that all the way around the Kenilworth side. I can support the project if that is what is proposed in the final resolution. I support I will support the demolition, but in my view, the developers must make sure that the two buildings, the church and the rectory, are adequately and properly sealed. You just can't leave a building to then be demolished by neglect. So those two buildings must be properly sealed, or I cannot support the demolition of the connector. So as long as that is included in the language of a resolution, I will support that. I would like to ask the developers, with regard to parking, with regard to the state of the church, and I know you have said in past presentation that you fully anticipate leasing the church building, have it be renewed, have it be restored, have it be a wonderful aspect of this whole project. But is there some thought that if that doesn't occur, that's where you would put your parking?
This is Samuelson. A short answer, no, I'm not a fan of knocking churches down.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have Michelle Anderson and Adrian Bailey yet.
Go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
You're unmuted.
Terry, pardon?
You're unmuted.
Oh. Thank you. Based on the guidelines from the Secretary of Interior, I don't think this project is compatible with the rhythm and the spacing of the other properties that are currently at this location. The setback is not consistent. You take the building at the Pelton apartment building, on the catty corner from this building, you have that gracious setback, which respects the rhythm and the spacing of this area. I just don't think that this is the size and the scale and the height it should be in this location. Furthermore, if something more appropriate was in that spot, there might be able to accommodate some parking. I also feel it's very short-sighted not to address what's going to happen with the church at all. We don't talk of anything about what's going to happen with the church, and without a discussion of the church and some sort of idea where it's going, I don't think we should even be talking about planning area in the area that's adjacent to the church. I just find that this is not harmonious with the other buildings that are adjacent to this building. So I cannot support this. And
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
This is Giancarlo. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So my thinking is, I know the area property really, really well. So eventually it seems the house has been sold or is for sale. I hear rumors that the church may be up for sale. So it seems that the concern only is for the empty lot, the building, the structure. But my first question is, like, once the connector area is demolished, I'm curious what happens with that spot, because then we have a piece of land that is open towards the parking lot where the new building may be going up. And I'm curious about how that will be treated as far as the residents is concerned, and how eventually the maintenance areas will be designated to each owner, to the church and to the house. So that's one concern. The other is that, we're talking about this project because it is in the historical district. And the two buildings which have made it an historical district really haven't been discussed at all. What is the fate of the church in the future with no parking and no immediate plan? And also the concern about how close the building will be to the house, considering that it's an historical house. Will the new project in some way or other aesthetically violate the integrity of an historical structure? Can someone answer those questions for me?
Yeah. This is Sam Messina on the developer side. So a lot to address there. I'll be as brief as I can, but essentially from a building zoning setback, understand we are asking for no variances other than parking. So everything that we've drawn, setbacks, height, etc., are within compliance as they're drawn. To address the first thing. Second thing to address is we have 3 separate projects, and so I'm not gonna discount your comment that there should be a master plan. Typically on the development side, our intent is to get the longest process, and we've been at this over a year with all of the groups, neighborhood, and commission from a design and approval standpoint. To go, another year or 2 or 5 with the structures as is sitting there vacant probably doesn't make much sense. So we're going to start with the biggest and longest process, which is the new construction portion, which is a 12-14 month project. We could, as simply as 90 days, activate the home, whether it's for sale, for rent, etc., as well as the church. So if and when we find that right user for the church, that'll become its own separate project as well. We don't know what that end use is, and hopefully we find out soon. But again, I'm going to reiterate, these are 3 separate projects, unconnected.
Well, they're actually not 3 separate projects. One third of that project has already been sold or is in the process of being sold. So there'll be a new owner to deal with as far as that space is concerned.
Which was the preference of Landmarks, Neighborhood Block, and Tremont West.
Correct. Still, the church has to be the rectory, the house has to be an independent historical building that remains standing. So I'm still curious as how that's going to be functioning in the back, that area that actually connects the 3 properties. What's happening back there? What is the demolition process, and what will end up being there once the demolition is completed?
It essentially ends up just a slightly smaller backyard with the garage. It's the single family home stays as is.
Okay. And then also, again, I would like to go back to the church, where once this building is built and the house is separated from the church, there's been no attempts to renovate the church or secure the church. How will it be an independent structure with no parking and no really access? There's no access from the back for the church, and there's obviously no access from the side. There's only access from the front. So what function could it have? It's a 7,000 square foot building that, even if it has an office designation, you still have to have 10, 15, 20 people parking there and having access to that church. How will that even remotely occur?
We have no plans on paper for the church currently. I mean, it's not getting knocked down, which is a plus. I mean, essentially, it's up for a redevelopment opportunity as we speak. That could end up amenity space for the apartment building. That could end up management space. That could end up office space. That could end up, again, a church use.
Well, why would that be part of the new structure then? It's a larger plan. I mean, it seems to me that these properties are not being treated as a unit.
Correct.
Yeah.
That is,
Why-
that is
so
correct.
If the church may have that purpose, which I think is very laudable, and it's a gorgeous building, why isn't that part of the plan to construct a new structure in addition to the preservation of the church? And then we would have a function for the church. The parking problem will still be an issue, but let's take it one step at a time, I think is what I'm suggesting.
Well, and that's exactly what we're doing. One step at a time, one project at a time, and we will be back for the church. You know, again, we're going to raise our hands and sit with the community, understand what that best use is. When that use becomes rears its head. So I guess my answer is stay tuned. There is no master plan for 3 separate properties. We're going to tackle one at a time.
Madam Chair, we still have Adrian Bailey and Mr. Harrison and John Rakoskis with his hand raised.
Okay, I'd like to actually speak also. So go ahead, Ms. Bailey, you've had your hand up.
I'm hoping everyone can hear me now.
We can hear you faintly, but we can hear you.
Okay, I wanted to speak, touch up on Mr. Harrison's comment on the demolition of the church and rectory, that the developer make sure that in both buildings, when the demolition occurs, to make sure that if there's any interior related to the demolition, that they make the repairs in those 2 buildings and the interior as well. Now, I wanted to go back to the last discussion we had on this project on the meeting. I asked about the balcony size. Now, the width of it is 5 feet long, that's the developer, but I wanted to know the depth of the balcony from the base of the building to the edge of the balcony. I wanted to know that distance. And my comment from the last comment was, could that be reduced to limit the mass looking up the balcony? But I wanted to know was that dimension. And then Mr. Harrison brought up about how it would look underneath it as well from the last meeting.
So I think just to try to, since it was fairly faint on my side too, it seems like the main items that you're asking about are the balconies and how the depth of the balconies. And I'm just trying to get to just a pretty concise summary of what you're asking about. And then other item, and I couldn't hear the first item, so I don't know if Maurice, you can fill in the blank there.
I couldn't quite make it out myself, what you were saying.
Oh, this is Sam with the development team. The balcony depth is going to be plus or minus 4 feet. We've done them on other projects. They're fairly shallow, just enough to get some fresh air. I think I heard a secondary concern, and it sounded like what was the intent, if you will, on the interior damage to both the house and the church.
Yes, she typed in the chat window, making repairs to interior of church and rectory related to demo.
Correct. So our demolition is exterior scope only. The interior scope will be handled with the redevelopment plans for each of the properties. Okay, it'll be forthcoming.
Material underneath the balcony, she asks.
That's what David, the architect, had kind of shown on the screen in person. It is a pre-finished material. It's not wood. It's not 2x4s. It's a pre-finished. I want to call it metal that matches the rails, floor, and tiebacks.
That's correct.
Madam Chair, we still have Mr. Harrison and John Rakoskis.
Go ahead, Mr. Harrison, and then I'd like to also speak after that. Stephen, are you on mute?
Oh, you're muted. Yep.
Sorry, two quick questions. One, what exists currently on the western side of the church? Is that a parking lot? Is that a residence? Is it at all a part of your holdings or planned holdings? And then the second one was, I forgot. So if you could answer the first one, I'll remember the second one. That's for the developer.
It appears to be, this is Sam, it appears to be a two-family home. And no, we do not own it.
Okay. Then the second question, oh yes. So is it your intent to finish, you remember I spoke about the connector demolition and my strenuous need for, to make sure that both buildings are absolutely sealed. So is it your intent to do that? I know you're not going to finish them on the inside, but could you please speak to how you intend to adequately seal both buildings?
Sure. As far as the rectory goes, again, unforeseen conditions, right? So we're going to start with the demolition. We did a little exploratory, more concerned about the church itself, which David had alluded to. The existing brick is behind the additional new wall or connector wall. So we're confident that that existing masonry wall will be the original structure, which will get tuck pointed and sealed from a wall perspective. If you go back to the house, again, any structural that's compromised will get put back into place. It will get sheeted. It will get Tyvek'd. I'd never like to speculate on future development or redevelopment, but we are assured that the entire house is most likely to be re-sided entirely.
Madam Chair, we have John Rakoskis and Michelle Anderson.
Mr. Koskis, are you here to speak on behalf of are you part of the development team or speaking on behalf of the public?
I'm speaking on behalf of the local design review committee. Okay. John Rakoskis, architect, and I've been a member of that committee for a long time. And I have a number of comments to make. While the rendering is on the screen, to make a more detailed comment, is that the last scheme or the preferred scheme? Because that's not my preferred scheme. I think that the height of the brick, that's the one that, to me, first of all, I know the intention of having that brick to some level there is to make it look more like a four-story building, which the Pelton diagonally across the street is, and which makes it more contextual. It also has the proportion between the brick and the, let's call it a mansard above, much better than the other one where it's lower, and that brick in the other scheme comes at a very arbitrary place in terms of where the windows are, and this at least looks more like a four-story building with a mansard above. So this is undoubtedly my preferred scheme, and whether it carries all the way around to the sides is not so important, but at least on the main facades and the main front, I personally think that's where it has to go. Other than that, I really want to say that I really totally agree with Michelle's comments a few comments ago. I've written letters about this. It goes back to the fact that I just don't think the pedestrian overlay district belongs on West 14th Street, and that affects the other project. I think that the previous project we kind of did the best we can reviewing it, but I think it's going to stick out like a sore thumb in relationship to the gracious buildings on the east side of West 14th Street. And so I have to get that comment out because I truly believe that. So I think at this point, that's what I have to say. And also, one more thing, you know, this building, maybe it really should be a 4-story building. That would have less units and less requirement for parking that solves some of that questions regarding parking. And I know that the developer is saying, well, he's within the height limits. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to the limit is desirable. And I don't think it is desirable at this location from a historic and an aesthetic and a contextual standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, or am I able to speak?
We had Michelle Anderson, I think.
Giancarlo has a comment.
Go ahead, Giancarlo.
Again, I'm still concerned about this. We're talking about this new project without any really conversation regarding the historical buildings that has caused this entire conversation. But specifically, for example, you know, I'm still not sure. We're creating an independent house, which has been sold off, and then a questionable backyard with a questionable garage access. And also, how are we talked about sealing off the church, but the church also has a fire exit door. There's a second entrance to the church that goes into that backyard we're talking about. How will that be treated? What will happen to the second exit for the church?
This is Sam. Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we're not talking about the church today. It'll be a future project. It'll be put in front of all the locals, including yourself, when a redevelopment opportunity becomes available. As far as compliance, today, none of the 2 structures that are there are compliant. You know, we're sitting on non-compliant lots, et cetera, and we're doing our best to fix that today.
Why are we talking about the church?
A project hasn't been identified to date.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I think I'd just like to state my feedback here. I would like to echo some of the comments that have already been made. I think this is a great proposal for this area of Tremont, but I do think we're trying to fit too much onto a small lot, and to focus on no parking as the way of the future, knowing that the limitation of public transit is, you know, currently the transit is not there to support this yet. I'm uncomfortable with a zero parking, supplying zero parking. I do think also, you know, what Ms. Anderson had mentioned, I do think we are, as I said, I do support the project because multifamily, I think, is appropriate for this location. I don't feel the setbacks are appropriate. You know, context is everything, and this is such a strong street. I personally feel, once again, it's pushing the limits too much in where it is in the setbacks, that I personally, you know, don't feel comfortable with the way it currently is designed. As far as the architecture goes and the design of it, I think it's very handsome. I would prefer this scheme also because I think, you know, this is above all item, you know, buildings and height of this area. And, you know, 5 stories to me feels, you know, too tall. At least the brick in this one is trying to relate to the other buildings. And so I personally do support this design, but once again, I do lean back of, I think, you know, in all cases, I personally am not comfortable because I think we're trying to put too much into a small site, both height, setbacks, and with parking. So that's my personal opinion on this project.
Madam Chair, we have Corey typed, the church is part of the conversation as the demolition of the connection is an action item.
Thank you. I think the stabilization of the church and the demolition, does need to be addressed, and so that could be a future development. I guess I'm personally unclear because I'm looking on Google Earth about the, could you go back to the lot split proposal, which is the plan, the site plan? Right, actually you can keep going forward.
Oh.
One more. Okay, so the garage is going to be maintained as part of the previous rectory, so that house will maintain access and to that garage, correct? And as the drive will be maintained also, so that, just trying to get to the crux of some of the conversation. Is that correct, related to the lot split?
That's correct. The home, the yard, the current driveway, the current garage all stay on one parcel.
I mean, once again, I think just it's very difficult for me personally not to talk about the church because, it is a large structure and could have a great use, but once again, would require parking. And, without addressing how we're dealing with the parking of this project, I feel like we need to understand the master plan a little bit more so that we understand the impact of that project also on the overall community. Because there is a lot of development being proposed for this area. So I don't think we need to be a one-for-one, but I think something needs to be supplied and thought through for the community's sake, because there are so many residential housing and apartments in this area that do not have parking already. So that's my feedback on the project. Other questions or comments from the commission?
No hands raised at this point.
Okay, well then we'll go back to, sort of the order of our agenda. The first, the case that we were hearing about was the demolition of the connector between the church and the old rectory. Would someone like to make a motion on the demolition of the connector?
Mr. Strickland?
Madam Chair, I would move that we approve the demolition of the connector with a stipulation that the rectory and the church be remediated so that they are properly sealed post demolition of the connector.
And we have Mr. Harrison.
Go ahead, Mr. Harrison.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Further discussion related to the demolition of the connector between the rectory and church.
Michelle Anderson.
Go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
Or to the church, are they going to maintain an exit at that location, at least for, fire codes? Should that be?
Can the developer or architect address that?
Yeah, we'll assure that there is a means of egress on the east side of the building.
Mr. Strickland, would you like to add that to your motion with condition?
I would modify my motion to add that condition as part of the demolition approval.
We also have Adrian Bailey.
Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
I didn't hear the last comment, but what I wanted to add to the motion that the interior repair related to the demo only is made to the two buildings.
Mr. Strickland's motion did include making sure that the structures are watertight at this time. The interior repair has not been part of it, but probably would be related to a future renovation.
Oh, okay. Understood. All right. What I'm saying is, and I had experience of project when a demolition occurs. Sometimes it does affect the interior because you don't know the existing condition of the ground and et cetera. So I just want to make sure the developer look at that, even though it's not an interior development project, but just as you seal the exterior, just make sure the structure only related to the demo is taken care of. If that happens, that's all I'm saying.
Madam Chair, Mr. Harrison.
Go ahead, Mr. Harrison. We can move on.
So how was Mr. Strickland's motion amended again? I'm afraid I lost that.
The two conditions that I heard with his motion, and Mr. Strickland, correct me if I'm wrong, is that with the demolition, it is required to make sure that both structures are repaired to make sure that they are watertight and stabilized, and the egress out of the church and the house are also maintained after that demolition.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Adrian is typing, include in motion interior repairs related to demo only, which I think is what you might have just said.
I don't think that interior repairs need to be part of this motion. Stabilizing the exterior and the structure, I think, is sufficient. Leaving the interior for a future project.
Well, it was interior repairs related to demo only, is what she typed.
All right, well, if the interior is disturbed in any way as part of the demolition, it should be part of the stabilization process.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second with the conditions that have been previously stated.
I have one more question, Giancarlo. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so the new boundary lines that are designated at this rendering, have they been approved already by the city? Are those new boundary lines that create the backyard of the church have already been created and approved, or is this theoretical?
They've been approved. They've been submitted and approved to the city and the county, and then approved by planning.
And they've been approved by the purchaser of the house also?
There's no purchaser of the house just yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Secretary, could you please call roll call and then announce the results related to the demolition of the connector between the rectory and church?
Ms. Anderson?
Yes, this is Giancarlo again. One more comment. So the house is being sold, right? That's under contract?
Giancarlo, can we finish our the voting on this aspect of it, since we do have everything moving forward as we speak?
Sure.
And then we can further commentary related to the project proposal.
Okay.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes, for the demolition of the connector.
Correct. Bailey?
She says yes to the motion in the chat.
Mr. Colicchio?
Yes, to the demolition.
Collier? Mr. Collier?
Director, are you there? And if so, you are muted. I know that he was multitasking with two meetings. He might be busy at the moment.
I can come back to him. Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes to the demolition.
Ms. Trot,
Yes.
and Director Collier. Okay, so then the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent, thank you. We'll move on to the third case related to the new construction of the apartment building. Giancarlo, if you want to finish your question here, then we can move on to.
Yeah, I'm just,
I'll request a
again,
motion.
curious. I have an issue with the idea that the historical portion of this project is being seriously neglected. The house in the back is being deprived of a backyard, an access for the back door of the church will be actually emptying into another property with questionable conditions, really. That's interesting. And also, again, to go back to the church, I know that I'm beating a dead horse possibly, but I thought when we do these projects, when including a new construction such as a new apartment building, we have to take in consideration the entire project, including obviously the church. Those are my comments for the moment.
Well, I think just to answer, Ian, since it's been answered once or twice, since this is now being split into 3 separate parcels, the developer is approaching this as 3 separate projects rather than previously known as one large project or church property. This is now going to be 3 small developments or redevelopments related to the property.
Well, the 2 of which, the house and the church, will be handicapped structures once this is done. Again, I have concern about that because we are talking about an historical corner of Bigwood. The church will be left without any parking, possibly without an easy access for fire or emergency conditions in the back. And the house also, you know, it's a shared driveway. Just the whole thing doesn't seem to be, you know, well planned for me.
Thank you. Further discussion, or would someone like to put forward a motion related to the new construction of the apartment building?
Mr. Strickland has his hand raised.
Madam Chair, I have a question for the developer. If there's a possibility of him approaching the St. Augustine Church that has a substantial surface parking lot right across Kenilworth that's largely underutilized. And I wonder if that's a possible alternative for a lease opportunity to designate some parking for this development.
My apologies. My phone had cut out for most of that. Can you repeat that, please?
I was asking a question as to whether there's an opportunity to approach the church, St. Augustine's across the street on Kenilworth, that has a largely unutilized surface parking lot. If possibly there's a lease opportunity for some dedicated spaces there to alleviate some of the parking concern for your development.
Yeah, absolutely. So those talks are underway with multiple folks that have underutilized lots for potential leasing spaces. So absolutely, yes.
So can you explain a little further? I think it would have been helpful to advance your case if you had suggested that earlier. To what extent are you trying to negotiate dedicated parking for this development?
But yep, and with all due respect, that's been the entire conversation. It's been raised in every public meeting thus far, especially the neighborhood block meetings. Apparently, there are multiple spaces. Mr. Mason, you can depict. I think you've had the first reach out on Khalid's recommendations for adjacent surface parking available.
Yeah, I spoke with representatives of Grace Hospital, and they expressed interest in having a conversation with us uh, when the time arises. Again, the way we've always presented this is that there are numerous opportunities for parking in the neighborhood, and we were going to lease 4 tenants as requested. We're still trying to push this project forward in the way that we've maybe described, not as well as Matt Moss, but again, in hopes that this is for a kind of tenant that isn't going to have a vehicle. Everyone is speaking realistically and saying, yes, that may not in fact be the case. There may be some vehicles. And so what our intention is to line up as many opportunities as possible in the neighborhood in the event that these spaces are needed for tenants. We weren't going into it planning to have the number of spaces that were asked for. And if that's the direction that we need to go, then Sam, you can speak to that.
Madam Chair, we also have Corey from Tremont West with his hand raised. You're muted, Madam Chair.
Sorry, dog barks. Can we move on to Mr. Mason? Did you have anything to add related to the agreements, or can we move on to Corey's comment?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so that's not correct statement earlier from Sam. They have not had conversations with the church, and they have not had conversations with Rosemary Center, because I know the people that run both. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, we also have Khalid had typed a couple of comments here. We have letters of intent are stronger than verbal agreements. And this is basic real estate tool used by developers.
Are there any letter of intents that have been agreed upon and that can be submitted, or are these just still in discussion state?
So I think after our last meeting this week, after 2 hours, I think there was a consensus that if there was, if we had expressed interest, LOIs, parking agreements in Tremont on existing lots that were available, we would bring that to BZA and have no issue as a parking solution.
But just to answer directly, there are no letters of intent that have been agreed upon that could be submitted to here. Is that correct? You're still in just discussion?
That is correct.
Okay.
Madam Chair, we have Adrian Bailey.
Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
Ouch.
Me?
Go ahead. We can hear you now.
I didn't hear the depth of the balcony. That's all I had for that question from the developer.
They had answered 4 foot high, as is the depth of the balcony. Is that correct? That's what I heard.
Correct.
Madam Chair, we also have Michelle Davis with her hand raised.
I would like to try to wrap up the feedback on this since we've had a fairly extensive, but go ahead, Ms. Davis.
Thank you very much. I'll be quick. I just want to reiterate that the Local Design Review Committee's position on parking was based on the fact that they were told that they needed 0 parking spots to move this project forward, and that they were not asking for a variance at all. So I don't feel like it's a fair statement to keep their motion that they made, because they were not dealing with the full truth of the matter. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Pettit has joined us, and he has a comment.
Glad you can join us both in phone and in video conferencing. Mr. Puttick, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize for getting to the meeting so late. I do want to say a couple things. I think it's important to express the fact that staff supports this project. We, along with city planning staff, directed the developer to follow this solution because we were at an impasse over the demolition of the rectory. And this seemed like the only way to move the project forward. Whether you agree with staff or not, we think that the building as designed is appropriate to the neighborhood, both historically and architecturally. Part of the confusion at the design review committee meeting on Monday was my fault. I didn't fully understand the variance issues. I do think that it's important that the developer come up with a plan to address the community's concerns about the lack of parking. But I do want to reiterate staff's position that we support the project.
Thank you. Is there further questions or comments, or would someone like to put forward a motion?
I have several people with their hands raised. I'm Mr. Harrison. I just want to reiterate, please lower your hand when you're done making a comment. It makes it very difficult to figure out who has made a comment, who wants to continue to make comments. And we've got 32 participants in this meeting. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Harrison.
Yes, just quickly. I would really like to hear if they are willing to discuss their thoughts. I'd like to hear from the other members of the commission a bit more. Mr. Tarasik, I wondered what your take on this project is and where you might be in your support or not supporting it. This is quite a momentous point in this project, I think, and I really feel that others should chime in. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have Michelle Anderson. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ray. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Mr. Harris, the thought that keeps going through my mind right now, and I apologize if I'm getting feedback. I don't know why. The thought that keeps going through my mind right now is that there still remains a lot of questions on this committee with respect to the project. I do respect staff's support of the project. The parking issue seems to be coming up over and over again, as well as some very valid points that Giancarlo has made. The thought that keeps going back through my mind, even though we've had a lot of discussion here, is whether or not the developers would, and I know Mr. Strickland made a comment earlier about at least this body not necessarily being fully aware of the efforts that were being made in finding opportunities for parking. And it's nice that they're discussing this with local business or local areas, but letters of intent are much more stronger, I think, with respect to that. So the thought that keeps going back through my mind is, as we sit here today, I'm not certain that I can fully support the project as we sit here today, but with some of the issues that have been raised today, perhaps, and I know we've spent a lot of time on this today and a lot of time on another session, perhaps if some of those issues were more fully developed and discussed and brought back, that there may be an opportunity for more support. But that's just the thoughts that are going through my mind right now.
Thanks so much, Mr. Tarasik. I appreciate that. Thank you.
We still have Ms. Anderson or Giancarlo. I'm not sure who's commenting.
Yeah, it's Giancarlo again. I would like to say that I'm not against the project. I'm in support of the development and the idea of creating something new for Fremont. But there's so many imponderables, so many questions that are left you know, and each time I listen to something, now we're talking about trying to rent parking lots across the street for how long? 6 weeks, 6 months, 90 years? You know, I mean, the project has to stand on its own merits. And the parking question is a big issue. The size of the project is a big issue. How it impacts the adjoining historical buildings is a significant issue. So at this point, you know, I cannot.
Yeah, so John,
Go ahead,
John
sorry.
and John and company, this is Sam, and maybe the right hand hasn't necessarily alluded to the left hand. All of the discussions that have been had, we own and control enough spaces to support this project outside of the 400 feet. Period. You guys have known this. We discussed it on Tuesday. We just discussed it last week. We discussed it with Don Pettit, Matt Moss. So as far as getting LOIs, we could sign those today with ourselves. We control enough spaces, again, outside of 400 lineal feet from the new building today. And you guys are well aware of that.
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Teresik with his hand raised again.
Go ahead, Mr. Teresik.
I guess I just wanted to echo some of the comments that Giancarlo made as well. I do think it's a great project. I just think that there are still some questions, as he had mentioned, and that's all I wanted to comment on.
Okay. I mean, I think, you know, it has been said, you know, it's having nothing that this commission can look at and reference related to the parking. The documentation is, you know, speaks better than the conversation, or speaks stronger than a conversation. So if that is, I would, you know, once again say that it's something that has to be submitted and agreed upon, and part of this development, in my personal opinion, versus just referencing it, because the demonstration that you're not going to be shortchanging other projects is also what we want to make sure, or compromising things that were previously agreed to.
Madam Chair, Ms. Bailey had another comment.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
Hello, can you hear me? I just
Yes,
want
we
to
can.
make a comment on the elevation, that the front was raised to the 4th. I would like to see the same thing on the west of the building, because I noticed it's a different height on the masonry on the rear part versus the front. It's right there. Go back. Yeah, you can see. Yeah, right there. But it's around the building.
I think that's an old, I think that's the old.
Right here on the left, to raise that up to match the front
If you go to the
one.
next slide, you'll see
One
it.
is going to it. Can you see that?
The next slide.
And it's the same thing right here. I would like everything that looks the same
There you
as
go.
this front one, with the corners line for the rest of the building.
Go back one slide.
Consistent.
There. This is what she, I believe you're speaking of, Miss Bailey, correct?
Adrian?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? I think we're now sort of at that point where we're repeating items versus stating anything new. So I would like to ask, would someone like to put forward a motion? I think, unless there is a new comment that would like to be made about the project.
Madam Chair, we have Carl with his hand raised.
Go ahead, Carl.
There appears to be a lot of unanswered questions and stuff, like the parking and a better plan and such like that. Potentially, could this be tabled if the developer is willing for 2 weeks to answer all those questions? Because from what I am sensing here, it may or may not pass, but if they have all the additional answers and the letters of intent and all that put together, would they be willing to table this for 2 weeks to come back at our next meeting to address all those additional concerns? Thank you.
Short answer is yes. We were directed to take our parking plan to BZA. But don't know if we're doing that first or second.
I think it would be appropriate, and this is my opinion only, that if you can give an appropriate parking plan to this commission that they could support you going into BZA, I think it would help the case to approve the plan overall.
Understood. Thank you.
Agreed.
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Dryer with his hand raised.
Go ahead, Mr. Dryer.
I think the parking is very important. That would not impact I'm having, I agree with John Carlo. I think not considering, you know, as part of this as a joint project. And I'm not sure that you can fix that in 2 weeks. So that's just my feedback.
This is Brent. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Again, there are 3 separate parcels. So that's like saying if somebody else owned the church, we would have to get cooperation with them to do something with the church. It's completely separate from this development. And to go back just a little bit on parking, when we had our 2-hour meeting with the block club this past week, we talked about our 40+ spots that we own, and we are having conversations with others that are closer to the building about having letters of intent. So I take offense to the comments earlier that we haven't had conversations, because we have. And our fallback position has always been, we can sign a letter of intent with ourselves anytime. We're trying to find a better solution that's even closer to the building than those spots are. We were told to do that in accordance with going towards, you know, BZA. And I don't know, David, if you'd like to have to chime in, David Mason, about your conversation specifically, I'd appreciate it. And I'm not okay with be calling liars.
Madam Chair, Corey Reardon has typed, you do not have a conversation with St. Augustine's and Rosemary Center. And Adrian has typed that on the speaker mentioned raising the masonry height around entire building to match the front 4th floor height.
The two that you had just, sorry, St. Augustine and the other one, we have
Rosemary Center.
We have never alluded to having conversations with them. We were simply passed their name by Khalid, saying they currently lease spaces and they are underparked, that they would most likely be open to having those conversations. So not sure where that got misconstrued. We have not reached out to those 2 folks.
Well, I'd like to keep this conversation, try to refocus this, because I think, once again, just to state it very bluntly, conversations and letters of intent are 2 different things. And if the conversations is had, then I would personally say that, you know, for this review and this public, you know, review, we also need that documented and agreed upon because it's part of this proposal. So I just want to keep it focused. You know, you can have and complete that offline if you would like about who you've spoken to or not, in all due respect, because I do think it's something that needs to be worked out. But I'd ask if we could focus our discussion to the design that has been presented and the documents that have been presented to us related to this. You know, I've heard 2 different, you know, a few different approaches to this project. Or there are 2 that we're at this point, because I feel like we're now reiterating, you know, things that we've spoken about through this conversation. We can either take a vote, you know, the owner and an architect has that ability to request us to take a vote, or we can table this to allow you the time to address the comments that, you know, we've given you today and, you know, in some cases the last time you came in front of us. And related to the local committee, we appreciate and hope that you've gotten something out of that conversation, since we do value what the local committees have, the feedback that they give you and their context to every project, but they're advisory to this commission. So that's where I'm trying to get us to commission feedback so that we can give you clear direction also. So from the owner's standpoint, I would ask, you've obviously received feedback on both sides of related to this project. I think we've been fairly clear of the related to the support and the issues that we do have on the project. Would you like us to move to vote, or would you like us to table your project?
Could I ask?
Some of our.
My only question as it relates to voting, when and if you vote today, we will get black and white clear direction on open items. Is that correct? Documented open items. And if you choose to table, we will not get those open items lists to cure.
If they'll be clearly documented in the meeting minutes. And related to a tabling, Don, or Carl, can you answer that?
Well, only to the extent if the project is approved with conditions, we will spell out clearly what all of those outstanding items are. Yeah, I mean, if we disapprove it today, then the process is over. We can table it with, we can table it with your consent and make it clear to you what we think outstanding issues are that can be addressed at the next meeting. That might change our opinion of the project at this point. I hope does that help clarify, Sam?
Not 100%. If it gets declined, it'll get declined with comment, correct? Here's what I'm getting at. Either way we go, I would like it documented of what the open issues are so we can rectify them. Whether it's tabled or not, we still want to continue to work the path in short order between this group heading to BZA. So I'm not sure who made the comment, but the recommendation of your group would be highly suggested prior to BZA, and we're all for it. As long as it's not going to sit for 2 months. So happy to continue the discussions, work out the bugs, get the documentation you folks would like to see, and move towards an approval. So however we receive that documentation from this group, my opinion would be table it with conditions, and let's solve the conditions as a group.
Well, I can probably clearly state what I have heard through this whole discussion is that the community, local committee and this commission is still not comfortable with the approach related to parking, because right now you are supplying 0 parking because there are no letters of intent that have been submitted related to this project of any other where parking could be provided related to this project.
Agreed, and that can be resolved within days. So we're on the same page there.
Could
I've
we
also
get a
heard,
little? Sorry, could we get a little clarification on the suggestion that a separate parcel, the church, which has always been a separate parcel, has parking obligation on a different parcel, which is what Brent's point was. Like, is that even a valid conversation point? These have always been separate parcels. How it was used is how it was used, but does a separate parcel really have a bearing on the open lot that we're looking at? And is that a fair talking point? And how are we supposed to rectify that? Respond to it if in fact it isn't a fair suggestion or assumption.
but the parcel that we're talking about was the parking for the church, correct?
When the church was a church, it was the parking for a church. It was a residence at one point in history. It is not the parking for the church today. There is no church today, and we don't have a use lined up for a building that's a difficult building to lease, and it's a difficult building to repurpose.
But are you in ownership of all of these buildings?
The development team is.
Sorry, I'm having a little difficulty with my connection. I guess you are in ownership of all parcels, correct? Under discussion currently?
The development team is in ownership of all parcels, but they are separate parcels today, and they're being proposed as separate parcels moving forward.
So I think, you know, in the context of this, since you are, although these are lot split, they are all under the same ownership and control. And from the professional side, I know that that's how we also need to look at this. So I think you need to help us understand, if you don't have the full master plan related to that church, what your plan is related to, as you remove the parking that was related to that structure with this structure, what's your plan for that parcel? Because we can't rob Peter to pay Paul and develop something that is then going to put a further hardship on another structure, as, you know, impactful as that church, in my opinion.
Okay, so then the church down the street that's underparked by 75 cars every Sunday, why are they held to a different standard than what we are?
That's not part of the conversation right now. It's not part of the conversation right now. I think, you know, we have to
parking is the only thing we've talked about.
We've also talked about how this project fits into the overall historical context of and setbacks related to 14th, and, you know, trying to demonstrate how it's both in related to the setback and or the height and into the neighborhood and the context of the overall area.
We followed the law that is in place there to draw this building, and we need no variances for it.
You need a parking variance.
Not as it relates to the height or the setbacks of the building.
And I think the Landmarks Commission does have the ability to direct certain areas of districts, so that to make sure the buildings are fitting in with the overall context in relation to the Department of Interior standards.
Which Don has done to direct us directly.
Which there's a building catty corner from it directly across the street that is in the same context.
Force.
Madam Chair?
It's feet, doesn't matter stories.
So I guess going back to the item that was put forward, you know, I think we are at a point that we've given you feedback, and you do have a choice as the owner and developer of this project. Would you like us to put forward a motion, or would you like to table it to address some of the feedback that you've received today?
Madam Chair, one quick, we had Michelle Anderson had her hand raised, and I believe Director Collier as well.
Go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
The comments of Madam Chair had made comments that I was going to make, so okay. No further questions.
Go ahead, Mr. Collier.
Yes, Madam Chair. I would like to really try to get some clarity with respect to this. My understanding is that with respect to the building design, the context, and whether or not it fits into the overall character of the neighborhood, that has been discussed extensively, and it seems to be consensus around the fact that the building per se is appropriate. There are concerns with respect to the parking scenario, which they are going to need a variance, a significant variance for parking. I would suggest that if we decide to table. It's just to allow the opportunity to provide what the parking strategy would be going into the board of zoning appeals. Now, having said that, I think it's going to be important to understand, and I said this in the beginning, that the task of the Board of Zoning Appeals is to make that call, because we're in a space where we're debating the parking scenario, and we've talked about that almost as much as we talked about the building. And I think that is somewhat concerning. So I would just suggest that we either table to allow for that parking strategy to be shared, or we make a determination based on the design of the building and the placement of this building, and allow it to move forward to the Board of Zoning Appeals for the debate around whether or not the building is going to receive the necessary variances. I think those are your only two options at this point. Thank you.
And so with respect to that, Mr. Collier, a vote approved or not approved with a contingency that parking plan is in place and approved by the group in BZA. Any issue with that? Approval with contingency.
Well, that's up to the boards. We should discuss that together. And I'm not dismissing what you said. I'm just saying what I'm posing to the board. Those two options for decision. We need to get to a decision.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have Michelle Anderson with her hand raised again.
Go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The current developers own the church. They are responsible for the church at this point. And the future of the church and potential issues with parking, egress, also need to be addressed.
Thank you. So, yeah, I think to reiterate what Mr. Collier said, I think we should move forward on either taking action on this or making a motion to table this to allow the developer and owner to address our concerns.
And Ms. Trott, we have Mr. Strickland and Mr. Harrison with their hands raised.
Go ahead, Mr. Strickland.
Madam Chair, I think it's very important that we clarify for the developer that if this project comes to a vote and it's rejected, if it is denied, project is denied, that there'll be no further comments or clarification provided to the developer other than the record from this meeting. So I think it's important that he understands that. If it goes to a vote, it can be approved with conditions. If it's rejected, you'll get no further specific feedback to rectify or overcome those issues that led to its rejection. And you'll be starting from square one.
I'd like to follow on from Mr. Strickland, which is regards to what the developer asked regarding a motion, which is, I would like to know, can we even make an approval based on a condition that another commission approves it as well? I think that, are we trying to enjoin another commission onto our own vote? And I don't know that, I mean, is that allowable?
No, I would, no.
Right.
These boards and commissions have a duty. The duty is stated clearly in the charter. Each commission and board are to consider the duties that they're tasked to do and make a determination. We can say that we think this is the greatest project in the world. And if it goes in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals and they think that there's a parking issue that cannot be overcome and they deny it, they reserve that right.
Right.
Now, does again, because we're development professionals, we think universally. We don't think in a vacuum. So the questions around parking and other things, we're going to ask because they're intelligent questions that you have to consider. But you still have the obligation to make a determination based on what we're charged to do as a board. Or commission, I'm sorry.
Thank you for clarifying that, Director Collier.
So once again, I think Ian just want to ask the owner, you as Mr. Strickland just clarified, again, we do, it's really on you as the owner can request us to either vote, which could be passed with conditions, or it could be denied. And if you are denied, you will have to come back with a new proposal. If you are not approved, I should say, you'll have to come back with a new proposal, or we can table you and allow you the time to address the concerns that you've heard from this commission. I'd ask the owner which way you would like us to go.
We would like to table.
Okay. That was the architect. Do we have approval from the owner to table the project?
Madam Chair, Mr. Dryer has his hand raised.
Can I make a motion to table?
We first need permission from Ian, the architect as the owner in commitment.
Second the motion. Okay.
There's permission to table. We'll come back to you with parking solution.
And if I can make a suggestion, Madam Chairwoman, with respect to the tabling, it would be very good to table to a date certain and provide the specific instructions to the developer as to what the expectation is.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Collier.
Madam Chair, we also have Michelle Anderson and Mr. Harrison with their hands raised.
Okay. Well, I did hear a motion put forward to table before we had approval. Is that motion still on the table? Is that Mr. Dryer who put forward the motion?
Yes, and just also for the record, my issue is not so much the parking, it's more the church and the record.
I second the motion as Mr. Dwyer expressed.
Mr. Strickland also has his hand raised. Sorry.
Okay, so a motion, we have a second. Further discussion, Mr. Strickland?
I want to make sure that the developer understands now, in addition to parking concerns, which he's expressed that he can solve readily. I think the majority of this commission has expressed concerns with regard to the linkage. Whether, we understand it's separate parcels, but there's a concern about the development opportunities being limited if this project goes forward. And part of our comments, he needs to recognize that needs to be addressed next time he comes before this commission.
So the 3 to 4 things that I've heard that we'd like you to address if we table is related to parking and what's the master plan for the parking related to this structure. Address the future on impacts related to the church, the rectory based on this project. And if those are redeveloped, where parking would be, since you are in ownership of the church and the rectory at this point. I've heard the context and how it fits into the street related to setbacks are the 3 major things that I have heard that the commission and the committee have brought forward.
Ms. Bailey just typed masonry height to address with motion.
And the height of the secondary element, raising the height of the masonry to match the corner element.
And we have Mr. Harrison with his hand raised, and I think Ms. Anderson either has another comment or was raised from previously.
Yes, I just wanted to say that there were at least 3, maybe 4 of us who want the masonry raised to the 4th floor underneath the 4th floor balcony. So that is at least a good portion of this committee.
So yes, the masonry height on the L portion be raised to match the height that is currently shown on the corner element. So does that summarize the items that we would like to be addressed in the next meeting? So we have a motion, we have a second. If that concludes our conversation.
Miss Anderson has her hand raised.
I'm sorry, thank you. Go ahead, Miss Anderson.
Yeah, this is Giancarlo again. Since the subject of the 4th floor has been brought up regarding the masonry structure, I would like to be a record that I would not approve a 4th floor for this building when it comes up for conversation again. Because part of the 4th floor is what's concerning me is hiding the church and hiding the house and neglecting the 2 structures that have created this historical corner of Cleveland.
I'm sorry, Giancarlo, I couldn't hear you. Did you say you do not support the 4th floor, entire 4th floor?
I would not support the 4th floor because one of my major concerns is hiding the church, hiding the house that have created this corner as an historical corner for Cleveland. A 4th floor just wouldn't work for it. Just, again, not respecting the current conditions of the property.
Giancarlo, are you referring to the 5th floor?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4th floor. I mean, 5th floor, sorry.
That's what I thought you meant, so that's fine.
Yeah, the height of the building is just overwhelming to the church and to the house next door. We're hiding 2 historical structures. That's why we're having this conversation. So it's nothing about restoring or preserving a historical district, Cleveland. It's about building a brand new building and unrelated, as they've said repeatedly, unrelated to the historical structures. That cannot be accepted, I think. So we can table it and have this conversation again, but if we're putting conditions to the tabling, in my opinion, that should be another condition.
Or concern. At this point, we're not making a approval. These are the concerns that have been raised by the commission that we'd ask you to address when you come back. As related to a timetable, we could put you back on the agenda as soon as I'll let Don respond how long we currently have between being able to appear again, just based on what the situation is having to do this virtually. Don, do you have feedback of how long, how soon he could get back onto an agenda?
Our next meeting is July 9th. We already have several items booked for that agenda. I would need your materials by the 2nd at the latest, if you want to be on that agenda. Our next meeting after that, I believe, is the 23rd.
So does that give clear understanding of the timetable of when you could come back to this commission?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion. We have a second. Mr. Secretary, could you please call roll and announce the results related to the motion to table this project?
Ms. Anderson. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Bailey? Ms. Bailey? Mr. Kalickia?
Yes.
Collier? Mr. Collier?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Adrian typed yes to the motion in the chat.
Mr. Tarasik?
Yes.
Ms. Trott?
Yes.
We have a unanimous vote to table.
So we hope we've been clear with our feedback and the concerns that we have that we'd like you to address. You are welcome to come and re-present to us as soon as July 9th, our next meeting, but we ask for all materials by the 2nd. If that timing does not work with you, then you could appear on the following agenda, and the submission date would be, Don, do you have that? I'm trying to pull up a calendar.
The cutoff date for the 23rd would be the 16th of June.
The 16th of July.
July, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you back about this project.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Pettit and Carl with their hands raised.
Go ahead, Mr. Pettit or Carl, whichever one wants to go first.
Hi, I'm just going to say that I'm going to be turning over the secretary duties to Mr. Pettit for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. You did a fine job, Mr. Brunges. I had my hand raised in error, so please ignore that.
Okay. Well, then we can move on to our fourth applicant located at 2814 Detroit Avenue, the renovation for Cohash Ohio City mixed-use development.
And of course, we have Mr. Bowen, Mr. Watkins, and Tim. I don't want to say the last name. It's Lay or Lai? Lai. Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Watkins cannot join us today, but we have David here with us and myself. So what you see here is a slightly updated package that we submitted based on some of the comment that we have received from last meeting 2 weeks ago, as well as some of the comment that we have in the Ohio City Design Review Board. So if you go to the next slide, I can kind of quickly walk through some of the items. Go to the next one. So we kind of consolidate a lot of the background information because we presented that last time already. Real quick, this is kind of an existing building that you guys are probably familiar with now. That is an industrial building that is fairly utilitarian. Next slide, please. Again, this is the location of the site, the corner of Detroit Avenue and West 28th Street. Next slide, please. This is a site plan. We haven't really changed a whole lot from the site plan. We did further define the landscape plan, which you'll see in a second. But in the site plan, basically what you see that is slightly different from last time is we kind of address some of the lighting kind of questions. So obviously there's some gooseneck lighting on the face of the building for the signage, as well as some lighting for the parking. The parking would be important to have lights, obviously in the winter especially. But our approach to this whole project is really trying to minimize the impact of the project with introducing new elements. So from a lighting standpoint, we basically have only 2 light poles in the parking lot towards the little island where the new curb cut is, and then there's another one kind of behind one of the bench. You will see that a little bit in the rendering, but those are 16-foot high light pole to cover half of the parking lot, and then the other half of the parking lot would actually be a small light fixture that will be mounted on a building, kind of on the on the east side to light the west side of the building essentially. The other things that you probably see is not super clear is some of the fence details. So we kind of tighten up the geometry of the fence, which basically is a 3x3 Corten angle that is about 1.5 feet apart, and then they kind of create this a snake shape along with the landscape. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see a little bit better definition. So this is our site plan that show some of the elements that we kind of talk about with the with the light pole, with the fence that you kind of see the dotted line almost, with the location of the trees, the benches, and so on. If you go to the next one, you actually see the landscape plan. So this is the landscape plan. From the image that we showed you last time, the landscape for this project it's very simple and straightforward. We have two kind of trees on the on our landscape design. There are smaller trees in front of the building. That would be the Armstrong maple. They are smaller size, so they don't kind of cover as much as the other one. Whereas the shade tree in the parking lot is black gum, and we have 6 of them, and then the rest of the landscape is actually going to be switchgrass. So they're kind of maybe a 3.5 feet tall, roughly, grass that would cover the whole the green area essentially around the trees, to kind of create this kind of soft edge to that street corner. And then at the corner of the intersection where we have the circular sign with the street number on it, we also would have a couple kind of plant that have some colors to it, and they are blazing star and the creek sedge. So if you go to the next one, you might actually see the picture of it. This is some of the other detail of the fence that I talk about on number 2, and then there's a Corten planter actually surrounding the patio area, and then there's also like a metal awning detail with a garage door there. So go to the next one. So these are the material palettes, both the landscape material as well as the building material and some of the accessory on the site plan that you see. So one of the things that we want to also address from last meeting was the paint color of the painted brick in the front facing Detroit. One of the comments was that the charcoal color is not compatible with the historic kind of nature of the district. So we found a paint that actually is a historic paint by Sir William called Rookwood Shutter Green. So it's a really dark green color that hopefully will address that concern. And as you can see, there's a few different kind of Corten material that we are proposing for the staircase. You have the structure of that. You also have the perforated panel for the guardrail. The idea of the perforated panel is really to try to make the staircase look lighter and more open, and actually can kind of see the framework, which is similar to a more kind of older fire escape, which was there, that was deteriorating, that we have to obviously replace. But the idea is to really kind of have that kind of see-through quality. And we do got asked some question last week in the design review about the actual product, and it's a perforation that is a 16-gauge panel with a 1/8 inch round opening for the perforation, and to have about 37% open area, and that's the technical thing. And I actually have a small sample with me, so if you are interested, I can show it on the camera. There's also the diamond plate surface for the walking surface for the stair as well. And then the rest of it, there would be some painted, like the awning would be iron ore, and all the window would be a kind of like a dark gray colors. The next row is really the landscape elements and the concrete paving. So you see the creek sedge, the blazing star, the switchgrass, the maple tree, and the black gum. being shown there. And then the last row is really some of the accessories. So with the bike rack, we have a green color bike rack. We have the street bench. We have the tree grate cover in front of the building. There is, obviously garage door, the gooseneck light for the signage, and then some of the parking light that we show. So if you go to the next slide, so you see the overall kind of image. The other thing that we also want to address from last meeting was some of the small window in the front by Detroit, kind of on the east side. I believe there's a comment about there are some old existing brick opening that was kind of covered. So we went back and kind of look at those openings. So we have 3 windows that you can kind of see in the front of the building. That was the result of that we try to match that. Those 3 windows smaller than some of the other one that we propose. And the other thing is the sign on the east side, that we are switching that to a dimensional sign, so it's not a painted sign on the brick wall. So that's want to point out. So that's pretty much it for this one. Yeah, that's the right. Oh, the other thing that we added to it is a minor detail, but the Corten stairs, obviously, we want to minimize some of the runoff, especially at the beginning when the metal is starting to rust, and then before it's stabilized. So we propose to add a pea gravel kind of area right under the stairs to basically mitigate some of those concern about the runoff of the Corten. So that's what you see at the bottom of that. The other, and maybe we can go to the next one. So again, this is the view from the corner of the building. You can kind of see some of the gooseneck fixture in the front of the building, and the light pole. And obviously in the front, you see the switch grass and the fence kind of coming in and out of that. You could go to the next one. So this is the stair kind of like a design development drawings, basically, to showing the geometry of the stairs. One of the comment also was about a concern that people might get up to the stairs from the restaurant entrance, and I believe one of the comment was to have it enclosed at the very bottom of the stairs. The challenge of that is that it was quite fairly close to the actual door that we're gonna have for the restaurant. So we basically moved that moved that gate kind of up one landing, and you can kind of see that on the drawing number 1 that there's a gate at that landing that will prevent people from going upstairs. So that they know that they're not supposed to go up there, basically. So if you go to the next one, so you'll see a little bit more detail of the stair that we were trying to show you last time, with a little bit of a detail of how that stair would look like, basically. And then the next one would be, I believe, is the elevation. So these are all the 4 elevation of the building, basically. So I think that's it.
Excellent, thank you. Feedback from the local committee.
We do have Mr. Harrison with his hand raised.
Okay, if you don't mind waiting 1 second, Mr. Harrison, let's just hear any feedback from the local design review committee.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I guess it's still morning, right?
7 more minutes.
So this went to the local committee, and they also had a lot of community feedback as well. So we do applaud the developer and design team for going through that community process. Some recommendations from the design review committee. So the building was approved with these conditions that need to be further developed. So landscaping questions, they would like to know species of the trees proposed, stairs on the exterior. It looks like they have done more research since the last time we saw this presentation, but to do more research into putting stairs on the interior of the building instead of exterior, show more details, and take into consideration snow removal and management for winter. And then this is a prominent design feature, and the design team really needs to further develop this. Fencing was another thing. I would like more details on that. It's underdeveloped, and they were not able to approve that yet either. The public space, and they would like to see more details on that and think about further developing the plans for corner activation. So the building was conditionally approved by the committee, not including the planter knee wall that they had mentioned, stairs on the exterior, signage, and windows. So they would like to see those items in the future. Thank you.
And from the position of the architect, did what you present to us today, was that what was presented to the local committee, or does this reflect some more of the details related to the species of the landscaping, the stairs, fence, public space, and planter knee wall?
Yes, so all the line drawings that we present today was not presented in the design review meeting. So those are kind of in response to that comment from them, that they you know, we didn't have a landscape plan to show them last time.
Excellent. So this should reflect, or this should respond to much of the questions that they had.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'd like to open the floor to the commission. Mr. Harrison, I believe you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very, I like the project as a whole, but I'm very, very disappointed that the architects plainly did not hear what I was trying to say last week, or understand that this, I mean, Rookwood Green, this building is not a shutter. It's not a piece of trim. That is a trim color. And it's merely another shade of charcoal gray is what it is. And what I was trying to say is that you needed to do research to determine what masonry buildings were painted when they were painted, not arts and crafts wooden bungalows in California or in New York or in New England, but what were buildings that were masonry structures, how were they painted? And this color is not that. And what it does, it makes that building, the historic building, the one that's the most salient feature of this entire complex, it becomes a void. It goes away entirely. You miss all the trim, you miss all the architectural detail of this building when you paint it this very, very dark contrasting color. I don't mind a contrast. It would be nice to have contrast. But in fact, what is much more appropriate is a lighter color, a taupe, a tan, something along those lines, or God forbid, painted brick again. You know, but this is merely another shade of charcoal gray, and it is not a shutter. So it can't be painted shutter green. I cannot support this project unless that detail is changed.
Madam Chair, we also have Ms. Bailey
Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
and Mr. Collier. Adrian? We can't hear you.
She did type in the.
Sorry, is the plan to have the guests stand on the landing? And egress stairs midway landing with signage.
I think what was presented by the architect is that the gate is to prevent people going up and standing on that landing. Is that correct?
So the question is, whether the guests can go up on the landing. Is it the question?
Architect, ask architect, will guests stand on egress landing? I imagine she meant, yeah. You see that in the comments?
Yes. Where guests can stand.
No, they should not be standing on there. Like I was saying, we have gates in the lower landing, the lowest landing before you go to the ground that has gates. And obviously what we signage is tell people that they're not supposed to be up there.
I think she's asking, would the signage be located on the gate or on the adjacent wall?
Can you ask that question again? I'm sorry, I thought I answered the question.
I think she extended her question to ask where the signage will be located. Will be located on the gate so people know that it's not a egress, it's an egress only gate and not to try to go through it.
It's an egress only gate, yes, that's correct.
Other questions or comments from the commission?
Director Collier, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think this is a pretty awesome project overall, period. Not just from its design, but what it actually does for what this area is becoming. That's number one. Secondly, with respect to the landscaping and things of that nature, I think that that wasn't an element that was there before. I hate the fact that you actually lost the rooftop deck element because I don't see that. I don't think I saw that on here. That's no longer there. Is that correct?
To answer your question, there is a conversation about the roof deck that ties to some kind of partnership agreement with the potential restaurant tenant. So right now, as we stand right now, we don't have that agreement with our owners have the agreement with the restaurant tenant for the rooftop deck, but there's a potential possibility that it might come back, and obviously we'll have to come back with a revision if that actually happens. So don't lose your hope yet.
Yeah, that's really good. And the reason why I thought that was important because there's a lot of vertical construction around this, and looking down onto this, it will be a much more pleasant view for residents that are in the church and state structure as well as other mixed-use developments that are happening. But more specifically, with respect to the color, just as a thought, with the front building, for whatever reason you want that to be distinctive, maybe have you considered more of a bronze-like color? Because I'm looking at the signage, I'm looking at the stairwell, and I'm looking at sort of these accent sort of elements on the rear of the building. And it seems that you definitely want to make sure that that front building has some contrast. But one of my colleagues on the commission have indicated that that color goes too far, I think is what he's trying to say. So I'm just wondering if a more of a harder, darker bronze-like color could achieve what it is that you're trying to accomplish, because it's clear that you want to have that front portion distinctive for whatever reason. Is that correct?
Yeah,
I would say I would agree with that. So as always, Director Collier, you find a good middle ground, and I think that's a good one. Masonry buildings were painted bronze shades, so that would satisfy my concern.
When you say bronze shade, you're talking about like a dark bronze, so like almost like a dark brown color?
No, I'm not talking about a dark brown color. I'm talking about a color that is more in line with the other colors, like the color of your stairwell, for example.
Oh.
I see. The corte.
Like
it still gives the contrast, but it also provides a rhythm, for lack of a
correct. Absolutely.
So
Thank you.
That's what I think the comment is about.
Correct.
Okay. It's
a
lighter. So it's closer to the Cortan colors. That's what you are suggesting. Almost like a copper or like a terracotta color, maybe.
Yes, certainly. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're open to that. I don't really have a, you know, but I just also want to point out that, you know, we weren't able to show the surrounding building, but right across from West 28th
No,
Street.
do not even go there. That building should never have been painted that color and is not the building that you should be looking at. That building was destroyed and rebuilt and should not be under any consideration in this project.
Okay. Heard that.
Madam Chair, Adrienne clarified, I think, her comment, and she's saying the egress stairs at the midway landing behind the sign will not be used for guests to stand on, is her question.
And the answer is yes.
That is correct. Other questions or comments from the commission?
No hands raised at this time.
Okay. Well, I'll just give my feedback. I mean, I think it's a strong project. Feedbacks are valid about the front color. I personally like the contrast of the brick colors here, and but I don't know if the Rookwood green is the right color yet. I do think, you know, having the contrast is nice though for the development. My only feedback would be related to signage, which I think I said this last time. I think this view does demonstrate it, that I think we may be a little oversigned with two signs on the front, one on the side, the restaurant and the property. I guess it really only, I guess my feedback would be, my recommendation would be to look at consolidating the two signs on the south side. I like the projected marquee style sign, but wonder if it'd be more appropriate to locate that over your front door so that it does achieve everything that you want. You know, it could be lit, identify the tenant that is in that space, and give that a connection to the pedestrian. Because I think the flat front signage, I think, is not really going to be able to be read because by pedestrian or vehicle, you know, as much as that projecting sign would be. But I think 5 signs right here is, starts to be a lot for this. You know, it's a modest size building. So that would be my feedback, would be to look at just studying those 2 signs on the south side for the co-hatch space to see if they can be consolidated into one. And to continue to address the color of the brick. Is there other feedback from the commission?
I would like to entertain, I would like to propose a motion.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Collier.
So I'd like a motion to approve the project with the condition of just evaluating the appropriate color for the front portion of the building, but understanding that it needs to maintain significant contrast. I get what the architect is trying to do here. It makes sense. It's just that I think that the color could be more rhythmic with the existing building.
So we have a motion to, with the conditions to study the color of the front building. And I would ask just to study the signage on the south side.
I believe Adrienne has raised her hand. She seconds the motion.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Further discussion? Doesn't seem like we have discussion. So, Mr. Secretary, could you please call the roll and announce the results?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please unmute your microphones. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey? Ms. Bailey, I assume that's a yes.
He says yes to motion in the chat.
Thank you. Mr. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. Dryer,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia.
Giancarlo left the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
and Ms. Trott.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing your project. We'll then move on to our, fifth applicant, the Church and State development located at 2861 Detroit Avenue, artwork for parking screen walls.
Please raise your hand if you're here for this case. We have Jesse and Marika. And Graham.
Janara, are you still on?
Excuse me, before we begin, could Don, could you explain the approved in 2017 designation and what impact that has on our discussions today?
Yes, thank you. I apologize, I don't have the minutes right in front of me, but we approved the Church and State project early in 2017. The outstanding items at that time were that they had to return with signage and the final plan for the artwork for the parking lot screen walls. In the interest of time, the signage went to Ohio City this last week and was approved, and the signage was approved administratively by myself. The artwork is a major element on these two buildings. We thought it should come back to the commission. So we're here today to basically to judge the appropriateness of the artwork for this building and to determine that it meets the concept that we saw 3 years ago.
But the content is not under our privy. Correct?
That's correct. It's very hard to do design review on a piece of artwork. I think we have to respect the artistic integrity of the work. The question is its appropriateness for the building it's being attached to.
Thank you. Okay, we'd like to ask the applicant to go ahead and tell us about your proposal.
Rika Clark is going to be talking on behalf of ownership.
Hi, everybody. And Jesse from LDA, the architect, is here, and Dinara, the artist, is also on the line. So I think between the three of us, we can handle any questions. If we could go to the next slide. So basically, Church and State is under construction right now. It's 2 buildings with a public plaza park in the middle on Detroit Avenue between West 28th and West 29th Street. This proposal is for the specific artwork that will be printed on kind of a fabric mesh panel that will wrap the 2 above ground parking levels on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the State building, which is an 11-story building on the site. And Jesse can talk more about the specific way that the mesh panel is attached to the building. But our goal for this whole project has been to use the opportunity of having these 2 above ground parking levels, which are on top of a full line of retail at the ground level, as an opportunity to bring a really large scale public art piece to the neighborhood. Graham and I were very involved with the Creative Fusions mural project in the neighborhood, and we feel really strongly about the benefit of public art. And so this piece will be about 20 feet high, wrapping entirely around the building. We went through a rigorous kind of international competition process to look for an artist. And out of a number of different submissions, we selected Dinara Mertalapova, who lives in Akron, or sorry, in the Akron area in Sagamore Hills, and is a really celebrated artist, has done a number of different pieces nationally and internationally, is in a number of collections, and we're really excited to be working with her. And maybe we can just kind of go through some of the images of what the piece will look like, and then Dinara can speak a little bit about the specific artistic intent of the project. So here's the project. If you go back, there's the project under construction. And so if you see the two levels of, maybe the image that's called View of Plaza might be the easiest one to see in here. So it would be the building on the right-hand side, those two levels where you can see exposed parking decks, concrete parking decks. And you can see it wrapping around on the image called Detroit Looking West and Detroit Looking East. So this piece would be a continuous band that wraps around the building. And Dinara has designed, in our opinion, very beautiful piece that kind of changes around the sides of the different facades of the building. So each facade has a somewhat different identity, but they're all sort of blended and connected into each other. So we think that this will be a really unique and beautiful addition to the neighborhood and allow kind of different views if you are driving past in a car in Detroit or you're walking as a pedestrian or walking through the plaza. So yeah, the kind of the whole system was, I believe, was part of the previous approval process. So we're really just talking about the approval of the artwork itself. You can go forward and then we can maybe see some, yeah. So this is a key that shows you the different facades. So you can see the top line A corresponds to the A on the bottom right diagram, which shows the facade on Detroit Avenue. The facade labeled H would be the one that's adjacent to the Saucy Brewworks building facing West 29th Street. And then the bottom left diagram shows all of the different smaller facades that would face either into Church Avenue or into the new addition of Church and State Way, which is the pedestrian plaza park that cuts through the block and sort of faces the church building, the other building. So I don't know if Dinara, you want to just talk a little bit about the intent, and then we can also, I think, in the next slide, I believe there's a rendering that kind of shows the design in place, so you can get a sense of what it will feel like. I think there's a couple of other renderings as well on the next slide.
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Dinara and I'm the artist, and thank you for the introduction, Marika. So the main inspiration was drawn from nature. I really love the nature here in Ohio, and I wanted to bring a little bit of that into this building. I want this experience to be very unique for people who live there and who would visit this area. So every time a person would go around the building, there'll be little moments that will be noticed. And I'm playing with a scale here. So it's like whether you're passing by in the car, you would see it on a larger scale, and or whether you're a pedestrian who is walking around the building, you'll notice the little details like tiny little bugs and flowers. And the inspiration for the color theme around the building represents how the day goes by. So it's the early morning, the sunrise, how everything is awakens, and then we go into a midday with the sun being high up, and then it's the evening when the sun sets down, and then it's the night where you can point out to constellations and discuss the night scenery. So that was the main idea behind it.
Okay, thank you. Is this, did this show all of your renderings or do you still have a few renderings?
Yeah,
sorry.
Those were the renderings.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Do we have feedback from the local committee?
We do have Mr. Collier and Mr. Harrison with their hands raised.
Mr. Pettit, do we have any feedback from the local committee?
I believe Donna Gregonis is still in the meeting. It was approved by the committee last week, but I haven't seen the report yet. Donna, can you talk about it?
Hi, yes, good afternoon now to everyone. So this went to the design review committee last week and they approved it unanimously and they didn't really have a lot of questions. Everyone seemed to like it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We also have Tara Petrus from our staff with her hand raised.
Ms. Petrus, why don't you go ahead and then we will open the floor to the commission after that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to say that I really applaud Graham and the developers for incorporating such a substantial piece of public art, specifically on the exterior of the building and adding an additional layer to the design that the public has access to. I also appreciate the thought that went into the actual design itself from the artist. I think it's appropriate. I feel like it's timeless. It works well with the other creative fusion murals that are in the area. And I think the colors and elements of nature really will be welcome during our more dismal months in the winter time when we don't have leaves on the trees or that type of thing. I did want to know more about the material as far as its long-term durability or expected lifespan. And I noticed that it had some airability and fungus resistance, but I wanted to know also about the wind load and any potential maintenance issues.
I can speak to that, Tara. So the mesh screen itself is a vinyl product, and its life expectancy in this application is about 3 to 5 years. And what that is based on is essentially the number of bends each vinyl strand can take. So based on this location, the wind loads, we expect the vinyl mesh to last about 3 to 5 years. In which case, ownership would, I believe their plans would be to recommission the artwork at that point and provide a new design to go around the parking garage once the vinyl screen needs replaced.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. Our plan was that this is kind of a semi-permanent installation. So somewhere in the 3 to 5 year time frame, we would kind of go back out and look for a new design, new artist. So we kind of like the idea that we get, a significant amount of time looking at Dinara's beautiful piece, and then this space can kind of renew itself and have a different sort of design and artistic identity every few years.
I love it. I think it's awesome.
Excellent. Thank you. Then move on to, I'll open the floor to the commission. Mr. Collier, you had a comment, and I'm sorry, Maurice, who was next? Mr. Harrison?
Mr. Harrison and Adrian also had her hand raised.
So just a couple of questions here. One, I think the artwork in this location, I think is great. With respect to my original question, it's been semi-answered with respect to the 3 to 5 year intervals, because I was concerned that this one piece will be there indefinitely. And now that you mentioned that there's an opportunity to be able to change this over time in that 3 to 5 year period, I think is a great positive, because this is going to be something that starts to identify with Ohio City in general. just because of the scale of this thing. So I think it's very important that you have the opportunity to revisit it from time to time. What I was going to ask though is at night, given this district is going to become more and more vibrant, and you're going to have a lot of activity in this area, what does this look like at night? Is it visible? How can one see this during the nighttime?
So at the moment, there's no direct lighting to be planned on the outside of the mesh. It would, in theory, disappear a little bit if headlights pull up behind it at nighttime with very bright lights, because it is 30% open air. But otherwise, it would be generally visible by the ambient light, the street lighting that is added along Detroit too. So there's a lot more street lighting along Detroit Avenue. I think the team has explored and has in its pocket some lighting options for it if it absolutely becomes invisible during the nighttime. But right now we feel pretty confident that it should be visible at night and can still be displayed properly.
We have a really robust line of street lights along Detroit, and also a number of lights, both sconce lights and bistro lights along Church and State Way in the plaza. So we have a combination of the large gooseneck street lights as well as the more vintage acorn lights along Detroit. So I think there's going to be quite a bit of light, much more than there has been in the past. So we feel confident that there is going to be sufficient light in the evening.
Yeah, and if not, I think it should be definitely addressed, because again, it would be tragic, because this is so significant in scale, for it to be a blank wall or disappear, or you can't really see anything. So you have a whole story of that building that just goes away in a district where it's really where the life is going to be, just given what has been established over here. So, I think you got to be very careful with that.
I was wondering regarding lighting, assuming that there is going to be some interior lighting in the garage itself, that might provide a little bit of ambient lighting as well, even when there aren't cars going in and out of there, that might provide some additional lighting source, even if it's subtle.
That is true. There would be some light through the backside of it too, which the garage lights will be dimmed when it's not being occupied. And when it's occupied, they probably get a little bit brighter. But yeah, there would also be 24/7 lighting in the garage.
Madam Chair, we have Ms. Bailey with her hand raised.
Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
She likes the artwork. Question on the image's scale. Have reviewed the image at a reduction. Mr. Harrison also has his hand raised. Sorry about that, Mr. Harrison. Missed that.
I'm not sure I understand the question. We have reviewed full-size printed samples of Dinara's design, and kind of done small mock-ups in place on site just to look at the scale. I know Dinara is very aware of just thinking about how this piece performs at different scales.
Adrian is saying reduce the size of the birds and the flowers. And we still have Mr. Harrison with his a small reduction, she says.
Go ahead, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I'm thinking about a mural on a building, I'm thinking about often permanency. I'm thinking about the application. I'm thinking about the scale, and I think this work of art really succeeds in all three of those. I would say I hope that the committee who chooses this art would allow this artist to continue to submit work. I think this is really pretty spectacular. And I, to my colleague, Commissioner Bailey, I would say that I'm certain that the scale will be appropriate to the size of the building, of the elements within the composition. Just currently, I think if things were too small, you'd see how just it couldn't work. I think currently the scale is really spot on, but I would leave that to the artists, really. Finally, if you could go back to the slide that shows a larger view of Detroit. No, keep going. No, well then go forward then. There, that one. I wonder, does this image remind my colleagues of the East 4th giant wraparound television screen advertisements that we went through such discussion about? Isn't this an infinitely more pleasing solution? Just offer that rhetorically.
Well, I think that's relative, because when I see this reminds me of Nucleus, and what was proposed for Nucleus, if that happens. And I think that we have to remember, and this goes to Adrian's point, which I don't necessarily agree with, because we have to remember that there's a utility purpose for this as well, which is to mask that the parking. Right, and the scale is necessary in order to achieve that. So there can be no debate about scale because it has a utility. You know, I just really want to double down on the point of celebrating this 24 hours a day, not just during. Why I brought up the whole night issue and how it looked. It would be tragic if this disappeared during the evening hours. So with respect to scale, I think the scale is necessary for what it's trying to accomplish. You have to celebrate it 24 hours a day, not just during the day hours. And I would say less like the example you gave, Mr. Harrison. I think it's more like Nucleus, just not digital.
I have to agree with Stephen Harrison as well regarding the scale. I think that based on the scale of the building, that the scale of the images and the artwork is appropriate. Also, I just don't like to tell artists to redesign their vision for something when I feel like it's appropriate, especially that we have to kind of respect the artist's vision.
Madam Chair, we also had Mr. Strickland had his hand raised earlier. Did you have a comment, sir?
Yeah, thanks, Maurice. I was going to comment as well on the potential for backlighting of the mural. And then I heard the comment that the lighting would be dimmed when the parking garage was not in use. And I would just suggest that the developer and the artist explore a more consistent lighting pattern to backlight this mural so that it really can be celebrated day and night, and that it not be essentially arbitrary as to when the parking garage is occupied or not. That might lead to some variability. I would like to see more consistency in terms of the potential backlighting of this mural to really celebrate it day and night.
I would second that. Just in with the backlighting might dilute your ability to see the mural versus highlight you seeing it from because it's gonna really accentuate the perforation, not make it go away. So I would agree with exploring more consistent lighting of this. You know, if this is really, it's a huge investment for, you know, everyone, and knowing our seasons around here, having an extension into our lower light times, which is a lot of the time, would be nice to be able to enjoy this, you know, for more of the days and the nights. But great, you know, with a grazing light that wouldn't provide any uplight to any of the units above. Other feedback from the commission? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Who was speaking?
Oh, I was just saying, oh, feedback acknowledged. Thank you.
No other hands raised.
I'd like to ask a question. This is Tara. In the event, unlikely event that something were to go into disrepair before the 3 to 5 year time frame, is there any MOU between the artists and the building owners for any potential repairs?
We don't have any MOU specifically between the artist in terms of repair. Are you saying if the artist needed to kind of redesign a portion of the piece to repair?
Yes.
I mean, we have a contract with Denara, so I think, I mean, Denara, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming if there was a specific area of the piece that needed to be redone for any reason, we would work with Denara to repair that. And I would say that if there's, I think it's probably more likely that it would be something that we would need to work with the fabricator again to maybe reprint a portion of it or something like that. That we've gotten, we had our engineers look at the specific lifespan of the piece, and we've done quite a bit of engineering looking at wind loads and things like that. And we're confident of the 3 to 5 year time span. But if there's, really serious issues that happen before that, I think we'll just have to, deal with those as they come. But we feel confident because of all of the sort of engineering investment we've made that this material will last for that time span.
I just want to thank you guys. I'm completely in support of this.
Just to quickly touch on the lifespan for the group, with the vinyl mesh screen, the ink and the color that goes onto the screen will outlast the vinyl itself. So if there's any concerns of UV light kind of wearing down the ink or anything of that nature, the artwork itself will be preserved on the vinyl much better than the vinyl after 3 to 5 years. So the colors and everything should stay as vibrant from day 1 till year 3 to 5 when the vinyl portion would need replaced.
Madam Chair, Denara had her hand raised.
Well, I just wanted to reassure and say that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. If there are any situations that would need to fix, I would be more than happy to accommodate and provide my expertise.
Thank you.
One other thing that we were hoping to propose as part of this meeting is that in the future, along the 3 to 5 year time span, would the commission be willing to approve allowing Don Pettit to administratively approve future designs? That's one thing.
No.
No.
That's my voice, at least.
I think we can, knowing we're 3 to 5 years out from that, we can, we'd love to see how something like this is going to evolve with the building and the area, and want to make sure that, the location is appropriate. I think we've heard fairly consistently. We would want you to also work with the city, with Tara, and making sure it works with the neighborhood master plan for murals in this area.
Okay.
Other questions or comments from the commission, or would someone like to put forward a motion?
No hands raised. Mr. Harrison?
This is Bob Strickland. I would move to approve as presented.
I would second it.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion?
Adrian Bailey says yes to the motion.
Okay. Then, Mr. Secretary, could you call roll and announce the results?
Thank you. Please unmute your microphones. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
We have a yes from Ms. Bailey. Mr. Collier?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik? Ms. Trott?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Excellent. What's your timing for installing the mural?
I think we're about somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks away, somewhere in that time frame. So I think everything's geared up. So I think the next step is just intensive field measuring for the screen size to make sure that we have a very tight and solid installation.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing it, the final product installed.
Thank you, everybody, for your time and comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to our last applicant located at 4612 Clinton Avenue, new construction of a single-family house and garage.
Madam Chair, we have Rachel Smith.
Welcome, Ms. Smith. Please tell us about your project.
Or maybe we don't. We have her signed up for this project. Is there anyone else here for this project? Mr. Harrison and Mr. Pettit both raised their hands.
Well, if Ms. Smith isn't here today, I'd be inclined to table this. This did go to the Ohio City Committee last week, but they asked for more information, and none of that information has been supplied to us yet. I did try to contact the owner earlier in the week, but didn't get a response. So Donna, unless you can add something, I think the appropriate thing to do is to table this.
Hi, yes, I did speak with the applicant and she may have sent you an email. I don't know if she did, but she wanted to table this until she could have the drawings updated and the site plan updated because there was a lot of things that needed changed from the design review meeting. So she asked to be on the next agenda so she could be more prepared.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we will table that application. So I think that concludes our certificates of appropriateness. We can move on to any administrative reports.
Madam Chair, I think we need to take a vote on a motion to table. We don't have a motion or a second.
Got it. Sorry about that. Got ahead of myself. Do we have a motion to table?
Mr. Harrison raised his hand and so did Ms. Bailey. Oh, Ms. Bailey said motion to table application.
Oh, she beat me to it. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Pettit, please call roll and announce the results.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Bailey is a yes. Mr. Collier?
Yes.
Mr. Dryer?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey is a yes.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik?
Yes.
Ms. Trott?
Yes.
The motion to table is passed. Thank you.
Then we can move on to administrative reports or meeting minutes. Do we have any today?
We have no meeting minutes. Just a couple of items for the administrative reports. For those of you, the three of you, who are on the subcommittee to deal with the emergency repairs on downtown buildings, there may still be a meeting tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock. I have a call in right now from Tom Sterinsky. I will let you know this afternoon if that meeting is still on or not. And Stuart, I believe we still need, if it is on, we still need to notice that meeting, correct?
Yes, you need to notice it under the Ohio Sunshine Law.
Okay. So I will keep you all posted. The only other things, we do need to arrange a site visit in the next couple of weeks to look at the Luther Moses House on Lexington Avenue. I will send out some dates to you in the next couple days. The only other item is that the Cleveland History Days were canceled this year, but they are arranging some virtual events. So I'll forward that email to you, and that's all I have unless there are any questions.
The only question I have is, will you send out a Zoom or not a Zoom WebEx invite for the meeting tomorrow?
We will probably do a WebEx invite. I'll check with Tom to see what he was planning, but we will make sure you get the invite out today if the meeting's on.
Okay. That's the only question I had. Any other questions or comments? All right, then I will ask for a motion to be made to adjourn.
Looks like Mr. Harrison is going to make that motion. Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I moved adjourn.
Do you have a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? Shall we just do open call, or do you need to take roll, Don?
You'd have to do a roll call as it's under Robert's rules.
I'm sorry, you do or do not?
You do have to take a roll. It's Robert's. If you're following Robert's rules to the T, then you're going to have to do a roll call.
All right, Mr. Secretary, please call roll and announce the results.
Miss Anderson.
Yes.
Miss Bailey.
You said yes in
That's a
the.
yes.
She said yes in the chat.
Thank you. Mr. Collier.
Yes.
Mr. Dryer.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison.
Yes.
Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik.
Yes.
Ms. Trott.
Yes.
The motion to adjourn is unanimously passed. Thank you all very much.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for continuing to respect and try to work with the video conferencing. I think we've actually, this meeting was quicker than the last and our agenda was longer. So that's a good thing, right?
Exactly.
So thank you all for your patience and your feedback on all the projects, and we'll adjourn the meeting and we'll see everyone on July 9th, right, Don?
Correct. Yes.
July 9th. Have a great
Thank you,
end of
everyone.
your week.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.